Good evening and welcome to the San Bruno City Council meeting for November the 26th. We have started a little late, and that was just to get folks in. I know the weather element is challenging, so thank you for coming and your patience. Call the meeting to order. Thank the Garden Club for the floral arrangements. Can I have roll call, please?
Councilmember Davis?
Here.
Councilmember Medina?
Here.
Councilmember Salazar?
Here.
Vice Mayor O'Connell?
Here.
Mayor Medina?
Here. May I ask Tammy Yuki to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, now at this time, if everybody can, this is public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Not on the agenda. So you want to speak on something that is not here tonight, which is like the grade separation. This is not the time to speak. This is for public comments for items not on this agenda for this evening. Can you just raise your hand in case we're going to call the speaker cards that we have, but I just don't want to miss anyone. Okay, so first the speaker cards.
Barbara Litka with Hip Housing?
Good evening. I'm Barbara Litka with Hip Housing. I know a lot of people are here for different reasons related to housing. Housing is a big topic these days. And every year we do a calendar where children kind of weigh in on what housing means to them. And a big word is safe. My home is a roof over my head, a shelter and love. It houses my family, my food, and my bed. It is a safe place to clear my head. And another young lady says, home means safe to me. It's where my family, heart, food, and all of the important things in life reside. Wherever I go, I always have my home in my heart. It's like a box where everything special to me is inside. So we on a daily basis are helped by the City of San Bruno with funding and support from staff to be able to carry out our home sharing program, which helps home providers stay in their homes and home seekers oftentimes find someone to match with. We also help folks that are doing self-sufficiency programs to get a more economically viable career to stay in this area and afford their housing. And from time to time, folks manage to get off a wait list to get into our properties that we own and manage. So housing is a conundrum, and we do it bit by bit, person by person, phone call by phone call, appointment by appointment. And we just appreciate very much the help that you give us to do what we do to help house some of the folks that are in this conundrum in our county at this time. So thank you very much. And we have calendars available for you here with the city clerk, and appreciate your assistance very much. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, and thank you for being a part of that.
Thank you.
Next.
Alexander Melendres?
Hello, City Council, City staff, and everyone in attendance. First off, I just want to echo Hip Housing's great work. If you haven't had one of their bags before, they look very nice. They do amazing work. One of the things I wanted to comment on was I wanted to commend some of our parks, I don't know what their title is, maintenance workers or park staff who were earlier today in the pouring rain setting up the tree for the celebration earlier today. And they were out there, you know, hoods on, you know, putting the ornaments on, and I just thought it was something that should be commended. And the other thing I just wanted to say was I wanted to congratulate our police chief. I think he's somewhere back there, I can't see, on his new position in the city of San Mateo. As the old saying goes, our loss is their gain. So I just want to say congratulations to him, and we'll miss him. Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Next speaker. No, is there anybody in the room that wanted to speak on something that is not on the agenda? So if it's Scott, it would not be. Okay. As long as it has nothing to do with the grade separation. Okay. So then so again, not on the agenda. Anybody else? Raise your hand. Okay, we're going to move on. We're going to go into, I'm sorry, if it's not related to Scott and the grade separation. Okay, sir, is it related? Okay, then please.
Okay, my name's Sam. My family owns the business on the 1100 block of Montgomery Avenue. I don't know if it's worth speaking tonight. I don't even know if it's worth being here tonight. I got an issue with this place called Railroad Place. It's located adjacent to the railroad tracks behind our property. I've been dealing with this for 40 years. I can never get a straight answer, and I can never get anything done in a timely manner. What I'm trying to find out is whose jurisdiction is Railroad Place. I talked to people from the city of San Bruno. I talked to people from Caltrain. I talked to people from the Samtrans jurisdiction. Everybody works with each other. Everybody points fingers at each other. Nobody can find out who owns that parcel of land. As far as I know, we've checked with the assessor's office, and there's no private ownership of that land. So therefore, I assume that since it's in the city of San Bruno, that the city has some responsibility over it. I attended a meeting in August. I specifically spoke to 2 council members after the meeting. I spoke to someone from the county. I thought I was going to have some accountability. Somebody was supposed to get back to me. 3 months later, nobody got back to me. I had to email somebody last week who told me they dropped the ball. This was since August. I've been dealing with this for the past 40 years. Why can't anybody tell me? How many times do I have to reach out to somebody? It's very simple. There's a parcel of land there, and I want to know who's responsible for it. Why? Because there's large eucalyptus trees that need to be maintained. It turned out to be a public dumping ground, at which point the city did make a one-time cleanup, and then somehow the area got fenced off. It started as an access road, and then somehow somebody put a fence around it. And then on top of that, somebody put a lock on the gate. Nobody can tell me who put the lock on the gate. I talked to Rob Scarpino from the Samtrans agency. He said that he was the one that put the lock on it. So I asked him, if you put a lock on that gate and you don't own it, why did you put the lock on the gate? You're preventing access to access road. And I just want the city to maintain the area. Okay. That's all I need. Just someone to come maintain the area, trim the trees. I don't have a fire hazard behind our building.
Sam, your time.
I
If you
don't
could
have
wind up
public
your
safety.
comments, please.
I'm sorry.
If you could wind up your comments, your 3 minutes has expired.
Okay, I just want to see someone raise their hand and tell me who's going to find out this issue. Because I'm tired of complaining for 40
Okay,
years.
Sam, please. We get your point. You
But
haven't
nobody
had
got
an
my
answer.
point in August.
Sam,
Nobody
please.
got my point in August.
Sam, time is up, so you've asked a question, so we'll allow the
Okay.
city manager to respond.
Sam, if you give your information to the city clerk, we'll get back to you.
Just like last August. Who am I supposed to give it to?
Okay. The city clerk's right
Okay.
there. Thank you, Sam. Is there anybody else for items that are not on the agenda? Okay, seeing none, I will move on to announcements and presentations. There will be no regular city council meeting scheduled for December the 24th. We now have items B, C, and D, and thank you to Joanne for stepping forward.
Sure. I'd like to announce the Holiday Boutique will be held this Saturday, November 30th from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. here at the San Bruno Senior Center. Come to purchase handmade gifts made by local artists and get your holiday shopping done early. Admission is free. And then kick off the holiday season at the City of San Bruno's annual holiday tree lighting next Thursday, December 5th at 5 p.m. in front of the Recreation Center. Enjoy holiday music while we light the tree. Stay for cookies, hot chocolate, crafts, and photos with Santa. All activities are free. And finally, the library is pleased to announce its second annual Food for Fines food drive during the months of November and December. Bring non-perishable food items to the library and have your overdue fines waived. Food for Fines applies for overdue fines only, not charges for lost or damaged items. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to consent.
All items on the consent calendar are considered routine or implement an earlier council action and may be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion unless requested.
Okay, before we go into that, under conduct of business, it has been brought to my attention that item C, item F, item G, that's C, F, G, were items that should have been put on consent, but I want to get council's consensus if that's okay to place them on consent, though they certainly can be discussed, have questions asked, or if there's something that they do not wish to have and can keep it on conduct. Anybody have a problem with C?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to keep C under
Okay.
normal conduct of business.
All right, what about item F? What about item G? Okay, we will move F and G to consent. And looking at the other items, is there anything that council has comments or needs additional information on the rest of consent? Hearing none, is there any action?
Move to approve?
Second.
There's a motion and a second to approve items A, B, C, D, E, and under conduct of business, F and G. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Okay. So we will move on to conduct of business.
Item 6A, receive update on planning study for the South Linden Avenue and Scott Street Caltrans grade separation project and provide direction to staff regarding potential of Scott Street closure to vehicular traffic.
City manager.
Sure. Good afternoon to the mayor, the council, members of the public, both at home and here. My name is Javon Grogan, and I'm the city manager for the city of San Bruno. Tonight's presentation will be given by Michael Cotto, the city's transportation engineer, supplemented by Public Works Director Jimmy Tan. Before we get into tonight's presentation, I want to begin by saying we are here tonight because we are approaching the conclusion of the planning phase for a project to examine options for a grade separation project at Scott Street where it crosses the railroad tracks. Talk of this project in the city of San Bruno began back in 2005 when talk around the grade separation project that is now existing at San Bruno Avenue was being planned. Back in 2013, the City Council authorized the establishment of a planning development team to begin to look into options for the grade separation at Scott Street. This project, as you'll hear tonight, is being planned in conjunction with South Linden Ave in South San Francisco. Together with Scott Street, South Linden and Scott Street represent the only two unseparated grade crossings in between San Francisco until you get to Broad Street in Millbrae. Grade separations are extremely important. As you'll hear tonight from the presentations, there's a planning effort going on by Caltrain to do a long-range look at Caltrain service. We're blessed with being in an area of significant economic development, but that also comes with increased transportation, both on the roadway and along the railway. And the projections are for traffic to more than double on the Caltrain corridor. Right now, on a weekday, there are approximately 92 trains that cross San Bruno. That is projected to increase to up to 398 trains per day. Gate times are projected to increase, where approximately a third of the time that you'll see from the data, the gate will be down. And so grade separation projects are extremely important. This is a planning effort, and it is important to note that any option for a grade separation project will cost several hundreds of millions of dollars and will certainly require federal and state funding. But we are in the very early stages, and council is here tonight to talk about the direction that staff and the project development team should continue down. And so there are three options that have been put out to the community for robust input. Those three options are, and I'll repeat them, and you'll hear them in the presentation. Option A, which keeps the crossing where you have all modes of transportation at the same elevation: trains, bicycles, pedestrians, and automobile vehicles. Option B, which is the staff recommendation, closes the area to vehicular traffic, but creates a separation between trains and pedestrian and bicycle traffic. And then there's option C, which keeps the intersection open to all modes of transportation, including vehicular traffic, but creates a very important grade separation between trains and all other modes: automobile, bike, and pedestrian. That option C will require significant adjustments to private property. The initial study calls for, should that option be chosen, up to 69 homes that may have a driveway impact and several homes that may have to be removed. During the initial study, it was important that the city council thought that it was important for the community to hear all options. Staff is now recommending tonight that we not proceed with option C, but we instead look at option B. Option B is important because it's reflective of the increased train traffic, and it helps to improve both traffic and safety. It also protects our community, and it protects homes. And so the presentation you'll hear tonight from staff is really geared towards educating the community about the project, what's gone on over the last several years. And for some of the members in the community, this will be a lot of a repeat because there have been 4 public meetings over the last, or this is the 4th public meeting over the last 24 months on this. But with that, I'll turn it over to Michael Cotto, our traffic engineer.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm Mike Cotto from Department of Public Works, and I'm here tonight to give you an update on the status of the planning study for the South Linden Avenue and Scott Street Caltrain grade separation project. He said some stuff that I was planning to say. I'm going to move on. So the project development team for this project is working on this study is comprised of representatives from the City of San Bruno, the City of South San Francisco, Caltrain, and we have some consultants on board, which would include AECOM, which is our lead technical consultant, Apex, which is our public outreach consultant, and CDM Smith, who did a traffic study or is working on finalizing a traffic study for us. Tonight, we have Daniel Kraus from Caltrain with us, as well as some other members of the team. But I mentioned Daniel specifically because he will be helping to deliver part of this presentation regarding the future of rail traffic on the corridor in the peninsula. So the agenda for the presentation, I'll start by giving you a goal for the presentation. We'll go quickly over a little bit of background, talk a little bit about the project options. Then Daniel will give his presentation on the future of the rail on the peninsula. I'm going to go over our community engagement process, and we're going to do that because that was part of our direction at the last time we came to give you an update was to improve our community engagement process, and so I wanted to spend some time tonight talking about that. And then as a result of that, we've been getting lots of feedback from the community, and so I'll also give you a rundown of the things we've been hearing from the residents of San Bruno. Then we'll give you formally deliver our staff recommendation to you, and myself and the other members of the team will be happy to answer questions. And then we'll be asking for your direction. So the goal for this presentation is to select an option for future study. So we'll give you the update, we'll give you our recommendation and ask for your direction on that. And let's go on. And Jovan mentioned the 3 options, and so they're listed there. One is A is to do no grade separation at Scott. 2, B is to do a grade separation at Scott that will be like a pedestrian or bicycle overpass or underpass, but be closed to cars. And C is to do a full grade separation that will accommodate all modes of travel. But as was mentioned, that will lead to some property impacts in the vicinity. Staff is recommending option B. This is an option that we think will solve or allow us to address the concerns that we will have without leading to undue difficulties in the neighborhood. We are not recommending option A, which is not to build a grade separation. And that's because we feel that, as you will see later, there will be some impacts from the number of trains that are coming in the future. And not doing anything does not seem like a good option to us. And then option C, we would not be recommending that because of the property impacts. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Daniel Kraus from Caltrain to talk about the future of rail on the peninsula. Daniel?
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Mike. Mayor and council members, thank you very much for having us tonight, and the members of the public, which are here in great numbers, which is great to see. So I'm just going to talk about kind of some of the planning efforts that are going on in the Caltrain corridor that will be relevant to the city of San Bruno in some way or another. And the one I'm mainly going to focus on is the Caltrain business plan effort that's in progress. And I'll briefly touch on city-led grade separation efforts. There's several more in addition to this one along the corridor that may be of interest, just so you kind of know like how everything's happening along the whole corridor. And then I'll just very briefly mention the high-speed rail project that you probably all have heard of a lot about. So the main objectives for the Caltrain business plan, the primary one that we've been working on in recent months is the development of a long-range service vision. And that's basically to determine how many trains we want to be running in the future and what configuration that takes. The planning horizon for that planning effort is between now and 2040. And as part of that, we examined 3 scenarios, which was a baseline growth, moderate growth, and high growth scenarios in terms of what kind of service vision we want to have. So just this past October, the JPB board adopted the long-range service vision, which was based on the moderate growth scenario, which is kind of the mid-range scenario, which accommodates 12 trains per hour per direction at the peak. So that would be the maximum number of trains you would see running through the corridor for this scenario. Of those 12, 8 would be Caltrain and 4 would be for high-speed rail. One of the other main objectives for the business plan is to determine which infrastructure upgrades are necessary to accommodate all this growth, which obviously grade separations is a big part of that. And that work is still in progress, but there is lots of information on the Caltrain business website on that too, in terms of what infrastructure we're looking at caltrain2040.org. In addition to passing the moderate growth scenario, the JPB board also gave direction to continue planning for a, quote, potential higher growth level of service, as well as potential new regional and mega regional connections. So instead of, if the region decides they need to accommodate more service in the future, they could go as high as 16 trains per hour, up from the 12 trains that are currently now Caltrain policy. So they want to just leave the space open for that to happen, potentially in the future. If that scenario ever comes to pass, you would have 12 Caltrain or potentially other rail services plus the 4 high-speed rail trains per hour per direction. And then just in terms if that higher growth level of service ever comes about, there's a potential for a need for a 4-track section rather than 2 tracks today through the city of San Bruno. Just kind of want to quickly drill down into what the service vision that's been adopted means for the city of San Bruno. Currently, we have 56 trains stopping at the San Bruno station today. The adopted moderate growth service vision would increase that up to 116, which is more than twice the service you get today. And also we're looking at ridership that would be well and above double of today. Additional benefits would be you would see an increase in speed. So for example, travel times between San Bruno and San Jose would be a savings of 10 minutes, or up to San Francisco savings of 4 minutes. So more service and a little bit faster service as well. So That was, what I just talked about was the amount of trains that would actually stop in the city, with the new service vision. But in addition to the trains that would stop, you would have additional stops, and City Manager Grogan had mentioned, up to 398 trains. So that's the amount of trains would actually pass through San Bruno, which of the 116 trains would actually stop in San Bruno. So you're looking at a very high level of train traffic, with the currently adopted service vision. So just wanted to make that clear. And if the region ever decides to go to higher level of service, that could go as high as 478 trains per day in total for the whole day. And then just kind of a similar statistic, but just for the peak number of trains. So during peak hour service, we see 10 trains an hour. And then in the future, with the currently adopted moderate growth service, you would see it go up to 24 trains per hour. And then if we ever go to high growth, that could go as high as 32 trains at a peak hour. So again, lots of trains coming through, which obviously makes, with grade crossings, that makes it a challenge to, in terms of the traffic issues and whatnot, which will be talked about more later in the presentation. And so what does that mean in terms of gate down times, which is when the crossbars come down and block the intersection so cars can't go because the train's about to go through? So currently, as of today, we have about 10 minutes of every hour where you'll see crossbars down blocking traffic. With the current policy that's adopted, that would almost double it to 19 minutes an hour. And then if we ever go to a higher growth scenario, you would end up at 24 minutes out of every hour, which gets very significant. So that's a very big deal, in terms of traffic issues when you get to that level. So essentially, trains are going to be passing through San Bruno every few minutes as we grow this corridor train service. So that's kind of my quick summary of the Caltrain business plan and what it means in terms of service passing in through the city of San Bruno. I just kind of want to quickly go through what other cities are doing in terms of grade separation projects. There's actually a very large interest in grade separation projects up and down the corridor now because cities are aware of what's happening in terms of the anticipated levels of train service. So it's become a big deal. So most cities are engaged in some sort of process or another at various stages of development. So I'm just going to quickly run through them. San Francisco has 2 grade crossings that they want to eliminate with a tunnel project that they're pursuing in their city. Then there's the Lyndon Scott, and we're at the project study phase, which is kind of like a feasibility level study, and we're in the middle of that. Broadway and Burlingame is currently actually getting close to completing their environmental work and their 35% design. So they're pretty far advanced in their project beyond this study here. 25th Avenue is actually under construction in San Mateo, so that's kind of its own thing now. It's not really in the queue for things. It's got a full funding package, and that's moving forward and under construction. Many of you have seen that. In Redwood City, they're looking at, they've just started a few months ago with their project study, which is the same kind of study you're doing here, but they're, you've been going quite a bit longer than they have in terms of where they're at with that. And then the last one that's actually in San Mateo County, given that these things kind of get funded county by county in the current arrangement, is Menlo Park, and they just apparently, they just released their project study report on the website, so they're pretty much wrapped up with theirs at this point. So, and then I won't go into the others. The rest are from Santa Clara County down. They're at more of the early stage, except Mountain View. They're more into the environmental stage of things. So, so that's basically a lot of projects happening in the corridor, just to be aware of in terms of when you're figuring out how to proceed with your project going forward. And then the California High-Speed Rail project, just a very quick update. It's at the project level environmental clearance stage for the San Francisco to San Jose section. And just on September 17th, they actually chose a preferred alternative that, and so they're going to be kind of clearing that. And that includes, where they want to locate the maintenance facility. And interestingly enough, there's no passing tracks that they're going to for high-speed rail, but that's separate from the Caltrain issue in terms of passing tracks. So, so that's moving forward as well. And I think I will pass it on to back to Michael Cotto. Thank you.
Okay, so the city has been getting asked a lot recently, why build a grade separation? And, Daniel just gave us a whole lot of reasons in the form of a whole lot of trains. And so why build a grade separation? Well, it's to protect the city of San Bruno, its residents, and its neighborhoods from the impact of all those trains. And the impacts, range from safety concerns with at-grade crossings, with congestion that can occur near the crossing as a result of the gate being down a significant amount of the time, and also noise impacts. Currently, trains have to sound their horn as they pass through our crossing at Scott Street. And so a lot more trains is a lot more horns going off. So this is some additional information about what we will see when all those trains arrive. This is from the traffic study that is technically still not final, but these are some results that are coming out that we have seen already from the study. And what we have here on the left is an indication of what the level of service will be at a number of intersections around the crossing. Both crossings. South Linden Avenue is near the top of that figure. Scott Street is in the middle of that figure, and the dots down at the bottom are San Bruno Avenue at Huntington and San Bruno Avenue at San Mateo. So you can kind of get oriented to what's there. All those dots are green, and that's left side is what is reflective of today's conditions. So today's sort of number of cars, today's number of trains. And the green means that, it's operating pretty well. We'll go over to the right-hand side of this. That's what we think is going to be happening in the future when we talk about the number of cars and also the number of trains going through the area. And if we do not build grade separations at South Linden and at Scott, you can see that we've got some red dots there, and that's an indication that we have some serious congestion occurring at those intersections. This is some additional information coming out that we have about queue lengths, or in other words, how far back cars are going to be backed up at some of these locations. This is for Herman Street and Scott near our crossing there. On the left, again, is existing conditions, so some queuing there. The red lines indicate the length of the queues. And then on the right side of this is the projection for the future near Scott Street, and you can see that we start to have some very long queues extending down that intersection towards the bottom. On the right is the Huntington and Herman intersection. And then, again, further up as well north of the crossing, the queue gets a little longer. Then we're going on just to show you, this is what we think will happen at Linden. Again, on the left, that's the sort of the existing queue lengths, and on the right, what we think it might look like in the future. And although this is a result of the crossing at Linden, you can see that, those red lines extend down San Mateo Avenue into San Bruno and down near the Scott Street and San Mateo Avenue intersection. So what do we do about all of that? The city the project development team is evaluating, again, the three options that were mentioned earlier. Option A, no grade separation. We could allow that to happen. Option B is to do the grade separation for pedestrians and bicycles. And option C is, again, the full grade separation for all modes of travel. And we'll dig into those three options now. So option A, no grade separation. That photo on the bottom is Scott Street as it is now. And essentially option A would be to leave this exactly as it is. And so next slide, please. So the crossing would remain open to all modes of travel, but we'd see no safety improvements from the grade separation. There'd be no mitigation of the congestion effects from the gates being down, and there would be no mitigation of the noise. Option B is the pedestrian and bike overcrossing or undercrossing. And these are bottom of these are some photos of examples of that. The one on the left is actually from Portland, Oregon. That's a pedestrian overcrossing. And the one on the right is from the Palo Alto area. So option B, in this case, the pedestrians and bicycles would be able to cross the tracks, but motor vehicles would not. So we do expect, of course, motor vehicle traffic would be diverted. Overall congestion levels are better than if we were to not do anything, and we'll show you some slides about that a little later. It does eliminate the conflicts between the trains and the other modes of traffic. And so we would see, expect to see safety benefits from that. And when we do a grade separation, the trains are no longer required to sound their horns. And this is a very early conceptual plan for what a pedestrian overpass or underpass might look like. I would say don't focus too much on this because there's a lot of work to be done on this. But the main point we wanted to make with this slide was just, although option C will have a number of impacts to a lot of properties, including residential properties. Option B, we do expect there could be some property impacts just immediately there at the crossing. It's not a residential property, but there is some potential we would need to acquire some of that land in order to be able to construct the pedestrian overpass and or underpass. I want to make that very clear because I'm not sure that we made that completely clear in the past. So I just want to make sure we get that out there, that there could be the need to acquire a little bit of property immediately near the crossing there, but it is not a residential property. Okay, so some more traffic information. This is a similar comparison. In this slide, we have option A, which is if we were not going to grade separate Scott. This does include a grade separation at South Linden because regardless of what we do expect South San Francisco will move forward with their portion of the project. And then on the right hand of this is the option B, where we do the bike and ped overcrossing or undercrossing. And you can see that if we do not grade separate Scott, again, we still have those red dots near the crossing. And there is also one at Herman and Huntington Avenue. If you go over and if we do the ped and bike, we prevent the cars from going across. Then we get a lot of green dots near Scott Street. The price we pay is the traffic diverts, and you can see that if you look at the bottom of both of these slides, on the left, San Bruno Avenue, the dots are yellow. On the right, they're orange, so they do get a little worse from that. And also up at South Linden, their crossing would suffer from some of that diversion. But overall, we judge this to be a better overall condition because we don't have all those red dots. And I would also want to point out that the traffic consultant has identified some other things we could do, such as optimizing signal timing, possibly doing other types of projects to add capacity at those intersections on San Bruno that might be able to help us to turn those dots back to yellow. And that would be some stuff that we'd have to, look at more closely in the future if we choose to do option B. All right, and last option, option C, if we do a full grade separation for all modes, so either the cars would go under or the cars would go over the tracks. On the bottom left is a photo of our very own San Bruno Avenue grade separation project where the trains go over, and on the right is one from South San Francisco. I mean, that road that goes over is much larger than Scott, so ours wouldn't look quite like that, but option C, we would have the crossing open to all modes of travel. There would be no motor vehicle diversions. It would eliminate the conflicts between the trains and the other modes of traffic, so we do get the safety improvements. The trains would no longer have to sound their horns. However, the big negative, of course, is that it results in the property impacts. So property impacts, why do we get them? And basically this slide helps illustrate that. On the top would be, the existing condition where the road crosses the train tracks at the same level. The road is at roughly the same level as all the homes. If we were to do, for example, at the bottom, we raise the train tracks up, we lower the road some to get under. You can see how the road elevation changes, and that house on the left, maybe not so bad. It has an impact, but we might be able to just do some modifications to the driveway. However, as you get closer to the crossing, that elevation difference becomes very large. And this is where we're talking about, we probably cannot maintain a driveway connection, and so the property would likely have to be acquired by the city, and whoever's there be displaced. This is, I believe, the notorious map that has everybody here. Worst case scenario, this just shows, what the area that would be potentially affected by option C could be. All those dots are driveway locations that would suffer some form of impact from trying to build this form of grade separation. We don't really know where the line is between the properties that would be acquired versus the ones that would just require driveway modifications. That would be something that would take a lot more detailed work to get to. So, right now we don't have that number, but 69 potential properties, driveway impacts. Okay, so switching gears finally to the last part of our presentation to talk about what have we done in order to increase our community engagement. So prior to our second community meeting, which occurred on August 28th, city staff did go door to door in the neighborhood. We canvassed, I would say, most of the 5th Edition neighborhood. We didn't get to the part that's just south of 380, but everything north of 380 in the 5th Edition was canvassed. We went once. If we did not speak with somebody directly face-to-face at the door, we left a door hanger. And then we went back to those homes a second time on a weekend. And again, if we didn't speak with somebody, we left another door hanger. And then prior to the actual meeting, we sent out some postcards. There were some social media blasts. Caltrain helped out by doing a press release. Announcements were posted on the city's webpage in various forms. We had an email contact list from previous contacts with the public, so we sent emails to those people. And an announcement was made at a city council meeting that occurred right before our August 28th meeting. Okay, so what kind of feedback have we been getting? At the community meeting on August 28th, the people who were there were allowed to participate in an activity where they could indicate their preference for the 3 options. So over on the right of this, you can see the options A, B, and C. We gave the people different dots depending on where they said they were from. And so we can see a little bit of who voted how. So the first line there is if the person was from the 5th Edition and in the property impact zone, so in that shaded area on the map we showed you earlier, that's that first line. So 3 of those residents voted for A and 2 put their dots on B. If they were in the 5th Edition but not within the property impact zones, those dots were split, 8 for A, 8 for B. There were 4 other people there who were from just the rest of San Bruno in general, and 2 of those people put their dots on A, 1 put it on B, and 1 put it on C. So the totals for San Bruno residents are in that next row: 13 for A, 11 for B, 1 for C. There was 1 person who was not a San Bruno resident who also received the dot and put it on the board, and they had theirs in the A column. And then just sort of a lot of other stuff we've been hearing from the community, and I'll run through these. One, we have been told that we do still need to continue to improve our notification process. Some residents have expressed concern about emergency service access in the event Scott Street were closed, so if option B were chosen. City staff or public works staff has conferred with both police and fire on this. They are here. One of the concerns we heard was that the residents actually did want to potentially hear directly from the departments and not from public works about this. So we do have people from the 2 departments who could answer questions about this later. I would say, as just a quick summary, the fire department has said that they typically will not use Scott Street as an emergency response route because of the potential for delays caused by the gate being down. The police department has said that they will use Scott Street at times to do a response route as part of their response routes. So if we were to close it, it would cause them to have to change some of their response routes. They do believe that would increase some of response times to certain parts of the city near the crossing. But they also said that their response times would still fall within acceptable ranges by industry standard. And I guess if we want to get more into that, we can perhaps ask representatives from those departments to speak a little more later. So more things we heard from the public. There were some skepticism about our traffic projections that we showed in the traffic studies, or on the slides about the traffic studies. There were some people who said that, why can't we do a grade separation that allows the cars to go through but would not affect the properties nearby? And this is unfortunately, we have a number of constraints on our project. The biggest ones being the presence of 380 and the presence of a creek to the north of the South Linden Avenue crossing that essentially constrain our ability to raise and lower the tracks as it goes through this area. And so it just isn't possible for us to raise or lower the trains enough to go completely over under the roads and leave the roads where they are. So that's why we're not talking about those as options right now. So there was a concern about safety at the pedestrian and bike crossing. I think this is basically centered around, the having to walk through a tunnel at night, and also whether or not, this would be a place where homeless people would congregate. There were some people who were suggesting that we look at options for opening other crossings in the area, and specifically there was a suggestion that we could open a pedestrian and bike crossing at Tanforan Avenue, which is mostly actually in South San Francisco. The border of San Bruno is right at Tanforan. But this would be something that has been suggested. There was concern about maintenance in the area, and this was both for should we build anything and also just actually for the crossing in general as it is today. There was concern about construction impacts if we were to build something. There were, of course, plenty of questions and concerns raised about the property impacts associated with option C. There were questions about cost and where the funding would come from. There were people who told us that they were in favor of reducing the horn noise. And then just sort of a general summary, support is fairly evenly split as far as we can tell between, I know we don't have any scientific polls on this, but as far as we can tell, support is pretty evenly split between options A and B. Those who support option A have been telling us that they don't believe there's a need to do anything, and that they would like to keep the crossing open to cars. Those people who I've spoken to who indicated support for option B like the reduction in the noise. They actually would like to separate the area on the west of the tracks from the area on the east of the tracks. This is related to the auto businesses that are on the east side there who frequently park cars all along Herman Street on the west side of the tracks. And these people who support option B have frequently told me that they just don't feel that it's all that important to keep the crossing open to cars. And then option C, other than the one dot that was on the board at that exercise that we held at the community meeting, the second community meeting, that's the only support we've seen for option C. There has also been a petition submitted to the city. 105 residents signed the petition, and the petition was in opposition to option C. And the points that were made on the petition were that these residents were opposed to the displacement of elderly residents near the crossing. They considered option C to be too radical and unnecessary. They believed option C would destroy the neighborhood, and they believed option C is cost prohibitive. And so with that, I will formally present you with staff's recommendation. Staff is recommending that option B should be studied further by the project development team. And just to reiterate, project B is the one that will close Scott Street to vehicles and build a pedestrian and bicycle overpass or underpass. And now we're prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Okay, thank you. City Manager, anything to add? No? Okay. No. Yes? No? Oh, okay. All right. So what I'd like to, we have 3 recommendations. Staff has recommended option B, not C. So, hold on, please. And if we could let us get with so we can get the meeting continue. So, just for disclosure, I did go, thanks with Phil, to Bayshore Circle Park and spoke to some residents because obviously there was a concern, and the petition alluded to maybe a definite or potential. And so anyway, we tried to go out and communicate to folks there. We had about, you said, Phil, about 45 folks or so. So I appreciate those folks that came on a Saturday. So what I want to do, and with the council's permission, is I will tell you right now, because I think this is what I was asked quite a bit. It was, A, who makes this decision? To my knowledge, and staff will correct me, it is the city council and the city of San Bruno who gives direction to the council on this. It is not an outside entity that will say it's A, B, or C. Is that correct?
That is true. Other agencies have approval authority over the project, but as far as choosing the design option, that is the city council.
Okay, because that was a question that was raised. And then second, because when we have speakers, I want them to maybe be able to focus on what's important and what's before us. So I want to see if there's consensus, but for me personally, I am not in favor of option C, and I want to see if the council is of the same, or if there's anyone that wishes to keep it on the table to discuss it further in dialogue. Is there anybody who wants to keep option C? Mr. Salazar? Vice Mayor?
No.
Mr. Davis? No. Mr. Medina? No. Okay, so what you've heard before you tonight is that staff, nor all of the city council, is looking at, talking about, or considering option C. So what we are going to go forward, and when the speakers, I'm going to see how many we have, it'll be for option A or B is what you might want to focus your comments toward, because obviously that's going to have what you've heard from staff. So it's A or B really is what's on the table. What I'd like to know is, I know we have several speaker cards, I think 9 to be exact.
We have 7, but I do have 2 that did not identify what item they want to speak
so
on.
potentially up to 9. And I don't know if everyone did put in a speaker card. So by a show of hands, and this is for time limit purposes, may I see how many persons wish to speak on the grades up tonight, please? And if you could hold it up just for a couple minutes, that would be helpful. I count slow. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, so I still have about the 9, so that's fine. So with those, what we'd like to do is call those folks up now. Understand you'll have 3 minutes to speak. There's lights on the podium. It'll go yellow, which will give you about 30 seconds. And then red means you've hit the 3 minutes. The reason I'm do the 3 minutes is because obviously we only have about 9 or 10. If we had 30 or 40, as I explained too, we would probably have to reduce that time. So at this time, we'll go ahead and open it to the public in case you need to get home or what have you. So, Melissa.
First speaker is John Miller, followed by Ruby Ross.
If you can go to but you're going to need to go to the mic, and when your name's called, maybe you can make your way over to keep it flowing.
John Miller, I live at 2520 Princeton Drive in San Bruno, and I do have a question. I'd like to know if any homes will be taken during option B.
Okay, and what we're going to do is get the questions and comments, and then we'll respond at the end.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker.
Ruby Ross, followed by Dennis King.
Do I get started back at the 3?
Yes.
Thank you, love. I got a PhD in research design from UC Berkeley, and it doesn't take a PhD to say that if you cut off one of our 3 accesses in and out of our neighborhood, that your little traffic projections do not reflect reality, quite frankly. Because we have 3 ways in and out of our neighborhood. We've got that Linden crossing, we've got Scott, and we go underneath 380. And that's all we have. If you cut off one of those, you cut off 1/3 of our access in and out of our neighborhood. Given your projections about all those other delays that you're projecting that if we don't do anything, how the hell is the fire department or the police department supposed to get into our neighborhood if they need to get into our neighborhood when we have 1/3 access less coming into our neighborhood? So it's nice that only now, as we're banting about option B, we're going, oh, and by the way, we may be taking some of your houses anyway because we've got some designs that we need to look at. So option B, when it was originally presented, was presented under the basis that no houses would be taken. And now we're hearing today that that's not necessarily the truth. Because if you're building an underpass or an overpass, you may be taking some properties. Bottom line is, leave our neighborhood alone.
Folks,
we're doing fine the way we are.
you're taking into the speaker's time when you do that.
We're doing fine the way we are, and even if our traffic obviously does increase, we are not a high-density neighborhood. Most of the homes in our neighborhood are not rentals, they're not apartments, they are owned by the working poor. We value our neighborhood, and we become very, very proactive when anything comes along that threatens our neighborhood, because we have fought long to maintain this neighborhood, to support each other, and the last thing we want is to see our neighborhood getting screwed around by people who don't live in our neighborhood and think you know what's best for our neighborhood, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Ruby. Okay, folks, I'm going to ask you not to applaud because it is hard. Some people obviously some folks are okay with speaking in front of crowds and some are not. So if we refrain from any applause, or if you agree or disagree with the speaker, and then we can do applause for all at the end. Next speaker, please.
Dennis King, followed by Philip Fitting.
Mr. King.
I like what she said. And I want to thank the mayor for his time and his efforts. Every question I asked, he got back to me. I couldn't ask for more. Very professional, and I appreciate that. Because when he didn't know a question, he says, I'll get back to you. And he'd call me the next day and say, this is what's up. I've lived on this block for 50 years, and the congestion is not any more now than it was 50 years ago. And to think that it's going to be worse in the future, I don't think so. Because if everybody notices, people are not gravitating to having their own car anymore. Kids nowadays, they take Uber, they take Lyft. They're not worried about it. The noise doesn't bother people there, just like the noise doesn't bother us in San Bruno with the airplanes. We're used to it. It's no big deal. I hear Caltrans say, oh, it's not going to cost anything, or San Bruno say it doesn't cost anything. But they want to raise the sales tax by 1%. That's going to be a problem. So, and it does say in your website that we're not going to take any houses for B, and now they come back and say, well, we might have to take some houses. If you take people's houses, make no mistake about it, you're going to destroy their businesses, you're going to make them homeless. Be a very bad thing. And that little intersection, it just services that little area, the 5th District, the business district. It's not a thoroughfare to 101. It's not a thoroughfare to 280. It's fine. Just leave it alone. It all comes down to this. Pedestrians have to wait 45 seconds. And in the future, they might have to wait 90 seconds. They're not from here. If they have to wait 45 seconds, I'm okay with that. If they have to wait 90 seconds, I'm okay with that. I don't think they want to ride up a big thing and cross over and go down. I think they'd be fine just waiting 45 seconds and be done with it. The city of San Bruno says on their website, it's a city with a heart, and I appreciate you guys taking C off the calendar, but I think we should just leave it alone. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. King. Next speaker, please.
Philip Fitting, followed by Casey Kassinger. Philip Fitting.
As Mr. Fitting's coming to the podium, thank you, sir, I just want to, just for everybody, because it's come up 2 or 3 times now, just for clarification. Mr. Cato, city manager?
Sure.
So, hold on.
Sure.
So, what the residents are asking is, first, as was said, there was none. 0 on A, 0 on B. Now, staff's recommendation is B, and now the word homes, which, to clarify, Mr. Cato said no residential homes. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. What you did say was that there was potentially part of a commercial property, or can you be more specific to the best of your ability, either manager or Mr. Cato?
The properties that would potentially need to be acquired would be actually part of Railroad Place, which we've heard a little bit about already tonight. And then also there is currently a lot there on the corner just to the east of that, which is, it's like fenced in and used as a parking lot right now. So it's not a residential property, it's not a home. It's currently just an open lot. And so it would be those 2 properties that we think we may have to take parts of that in order to construct a pedestrian overpass or underpass for option B.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that. And with that, please, Mr.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and City Council. Now, did I understand correctly? I have to hear it about 3 different times, but is C completely off the table with the city council now?
Mr. Fitting, if you didn't hear, I asked each council member independently,
did. I was over
individually,
there listening,
and
but-
they all said yes. C is not being considered. Staff is not recommending C. Correct.
Well, thank you very much, and I'm happy that no one will lose their homes. And that's the end. All the stuff that I had written down is all on C. So,
but I do
and
want
negative.
I do want to say it's good to see you getting around as well as you are.
Thank you so
from
much.
your surgery.
Okay. I appreciate it.
Casey Cassinger, followed by Angelo Crucis.
That's my landlord. And I've been there for almost 30 years. And first, I'd like to say thank you to him and everybody that's helping in our community. Second is, being that I've lived there pretty much my entire life, that intersection has always been kind of horrible for people who live there. A lot of people who aren't from that intersection have no clue that you don't stop on the tracks. Though there's signs all over the place, I think my biggest concern would be changing anything is going to make traffic worse. It's already bad. Second, is there any way we could look at a stoplight? Something as simple as a stoplight on the Herman Scott Street side and one on the alternate side, Montgomery area and Scott as well. Mainly because I feel like a stoplight would help alleviate some of that congestion, and maybe a stoplight can also, I don't know traffic, but if a stoplight can also put a stop in when trains are coming, so when the bars go down. Unfortunately, for the first time in the entire time I've grown up there, only one person has been hit on that intersection of the train tracks months ago now. Sad, but at the same time, that person chose to go around the cross where it was already down. If there was a way that no one could cross through, or if there was a stoplight basically saying, don't cross through, don't even think about crossing through, it may alleviate some of that traffic. It may not impose on any of our homes. I am the second building from that corner. The first building from that corner also is someone I've known my entire life, someone that they'll be affected, obviously, if there's any type of grade separation, even if it is Plan B. So if possible, just leave it alone and maybe try to give us a stoplight. And also lights. We have no lights in that intersection where people crossing. My dad has 2 small dogs. My dad, in his mid-70s, he'll hate me for saying this, it's hard. He won't say it, but it's hard to cross the street for cars to actually see you. I've yelled at cars. I've waved my hands. I've done those things like slow down. There's children in this neighborhood. Day or night, people run that stoplight. Police officers used to wait there and used to actually, pull people over. I don't see that as much, and also that's taking out from the community what police officers could already be doing on the side, let alone just putting a stoplight and some lights could probably make it a lot easier for all of us. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Angelo Crucis, followed by Kim Hoffman.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm a resident of San Bruno since 2015 and homeowner since a decade ago. I live 200 feet from the Caltrain tracks, about a block from Scott Avenue, the main topic for tonight. To state again the obvious, the Scott project touches personally. It will impact me, my future, my family. I have very strong vested interest to see San Bruno be a safe place, a clean place, a fair place for everyone. I need to give credit when credit is due. Over the past 10 years, I've seen my area become clean, new paved roads, bush maintained, responsive police, but with it also the hurdles of a rapidly growing metropolitan area, such as more traffic, more train noise, airplane noise, people noise. It's just inevitable. It's going to happen. We're in a very popular area. We're in a good area. More cars is not the answer. That's my personal belief to just practically, this a growing rapidly area, shortness of housing. I do see public transportation as a positive agenda to pursue and invest. Keeping that all in mind, I do support option B. I urge my neighbors, my community to listen to facts rather than explosive fear-mongering that I see and hear spreading on our neighborhood, It's very counterproductive. We need to hear facts. There needs to be more information in behalf of the city, more openly. Expecting nothing, not having an outlook on the future or change is dangerous and counterproductive. Doing nothing is negligent. But I do see some real losers on this project, on the Scott grade separation. All those body shops, all those mechanic shops using Herman Avenue as their personal parking lot, impacting our residential area. Those are the real losers, and I'm not sorry for that. And I did hear someone say something about cutting access for emergency services into our neighborhood, and I do have a question about that. Since we are cutting one entrance into our area, is there a consideration to maybe opening that area into Huntington Avenue? Maybe that'll be into consideration to mitigate that concern, and access from Huntington Avenue into that neighborhood. And thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Kim Hoffman, followed by Heng Song Ji.
Well, first of all, I'm not a public speaker, and I get very nervous.
No problem.
I've lived at 72 Scott Street since I was 6 months old, and the thought of losing my house kind of scared me because I've lived there with my mom my whole life, with Casey and Phil. So the idea that you guys aren't going to take away our house has made me a little bit calmer. The only concern that I would have would be the construction of building this particular underway or walk-over way of the train tracks. How would that already affect these streets that are full of cars, as I said, parking from the mechanics buildings or just in general of the narrowness of San Bruno streets? How would that already affect an intersection that you guys already want to do stuff with? How would that kind of construction affect people who live, especially here on that corner? That would be my only really big concern.
Thank you very much. You did great.
Heng Song Ji, followed by Drew.
We've been handed a no on option C, but I think we took care of that. On the other side, I know he was circulating in the room, but I want you to know what we received as well, and it's this document that some of you folks also have in your hand.
Okay, so hi everyone. So my name is Han Song. I live in Scott Street, and I have a Master of Architecture degree from USC, and also I'm a professional architectural designer. I participated a lot of large projects, for instance, 2022 Beijing Olympic, and also the SFO Grand Hyatt in the airport. I also did the $2 billion project in Stanford, which is New Stanford Hospital. So today I want to say something. And first of all, according to my analysis, I believe so we need to do something for our community, but not those options, but a better design. How to design to improve our community is important. Because of the increase of the noise, we need to find a way to reduce it. So I believe if we can build a sound wall between the street, the railway and the street will be helpful. Build a sound wall. And also I support the design to build a overpassing cross. The reason is underpass and also some enclosed bridge will raise the homeless issue, because anything with a shelter will have this problem. So that's why in my presentation board I made it as an open to sky. So there's no shelter. This is all for volunteers. So it is. I just want to contribute something for our community. And there was one resident mentioned that if we block the Scott Street, it will block the ambulance and police car. I don't agree with it, because according to my mapping analysis, the Kaiser Center and also the police station is in the west side of our community, but not the east side. So it will not influence those cars to come to our community. So I believe we need a better community. And I attended the previous meeting, and I saw a lot of good design in option C, but there's only some cheap design in option B. So that's why I believe we need a good design, but not an option for our community. So it is all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next speaker, please.
Drew, followed by Mr. Alesna.
Drew?
Good evening, members of the council, mayor, staff, residents. So I went to the August meeting and I learned a lot just there, and I drove around the neighborhood after, and I just want to zoom out slightly because the focus keeps being on Scott, and I want to pop up ever so slightly. And why? Because if you go north at Tanforan, the streets on both sides. And maybe that connects, maybe that works for the neighborhood, I'm not sure. But when you look at the whole grade step, you don't need many homes. I don't even know if you need any homes. Like all the elevation, it fits so many of the criteria here that we're driving just connectivity to this neighborhood. I call it like option D. It could work for the bike ped too. It's like, why build a tunnel under the tracks? Wait till the tracks get above or way below. And I just, it's like the other reason for this is South San Francisco has a major project plan for 101. They're going to add another interchange, and it's going to connect to Linden just north of this area. Like, I just feel like the people of San Bruno need connectivity across this. I'm not saying option C absolutely at all when I say that. It's just, why not look at Tanforan? A day of engineering work can quickly flesh out how viable that is, whether it's worth spending any more time or effort. But I just look at how tight everything's jammed in. Everything's Scott, Scott, Scott. To me, it's everything in San Bruno's city limits is fair game. How to improve the access, how to make that area better, what adds value to that area, what listens to the residents in that area. And why it's only Scott? Why isn't it that whole corridor, and what could be done to make it better for everyone involved there? And so I kind of considered option D. I sent it in. I said, hey, just take a quick look at that. I've been going to other grade step meetings up and down the peninsula, and other cities are trying to connect both sides of the tracks. They're trying to do things. And a lot of the issues I've heard here, about the underneath and all the traffic and emergency vehicles, that's why I'm struggling. Why can't we pop up ever so slightly and look, if you move it north, does that solve the problems in so many different ways? I don't know. I'm not claiming it does. But to me, as a taxpayer for the county, we're going to spend $200 million here. Isn't it worth to see if we can do something better that adds value, that just makes things better and stuff? I just struggle. There's so much. We want more money for this. And it's like, can we pop up a little bit above Scott Boulevard and see that whole corridor? Is there any other places it might be better to do something? Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. Next
Mr. Lesna, followed by Carmen Flores.
Mr. Lesna, sir.
I live at 88 Scott Street, right there. Scott and Herman. Now, if they was to take my house away, I'll be homeless. I couldn't pay the tax on the next house. I raised 4 children on that house. I lived there 60 years. And 2 went to Cappuccino, 2 went to Crespo, And I've been there 60 years. I hear the train. I don't see so many trains go by. These guys are talking about this much trains, that much trains. I don't hear it. I'm right there. Anyway, Bart tried to take 5th Edition away from us. Now Caltrain if they're going to take houses away from us, give us a break. The law took my wife away from me. Now I only get a few more years to leave. Let me leave me in my house. Where 60 years ago I bought it. Thank you.
Thank you. And just to reaffirm, option C is off the table, but I appreciate and I was reminiscing that I coached his daughter in softball. So we had to let him speak and make sure he was listened to. Any other speaker cards?
That's the last speaker for tonight.
Okay, folks. Okay. So folks, I try to figure out on time, so that's why I'm always asking, and I'm asking for a show of hands. So We've gone through the room. If you want to speak at this time, I'm going to say 2 minutes because, I want to make sure we can get to deliberation. So if you're going to speak, you need to come to the podium now. It'll be for 2 minutes, and I'm going to keep you to 2 minutes, please. And I'll be as respectful as I can, but please be respectful. People want to kind of get some information.
Okay, so I guess I'm going to be short 1 minute. Basically, I just want full transparency and full accountability with the public. I'm going to refer to this little map here, the red area, which is the parking lot. That belongs to AT&T. And I didn't know anything about this until tonight. I'm wondering how come it wasn't mentioned in the prior meetings. And also, I'd like to know if there's going to be a sweetheart deal when that property is going to be bought. I would like to know why the other parcels, which includes mine, why that isn't part of the deal. Second of all, I just want the public to be fully informed because I keep seeing safety as one of the top reasons why we're talking about all this. As far as I know, there's only been one fatality, at least within the past 10 years. And I don't know of any car collisions in that area. So safety, to me, is being sold as the #1 priority, which I think is probably a lower priority. Because I think the plan is contingent on what the city of South San Francisco wants to do. I know option C is off the table, but do we really have an option A? Because if we're going to be spending all this money, why spend it if there's not going to be elimination of option B? And then 20 seconds left. City Manager Jovan Grogan, I don't mean to put you on the spot. I've called you in the past, left you a message with your receptionist.
Sir, keep to the topic, please, of the grade separation.
This is all about accountability and
Okay,
transparency.
but-
If I call an official, a city
Okay.
official, and leave a message,
Sam, you made that
2 weeks
clear
later
as
is
far
not a
as your
reasonable
concern,
time.
and the city manager said, and we got your information from the clerk. Thank you.
I did not originally put in a comment card because I'm a resident of Bel Air, not this neighborhood, and I do respect that the opinion of the people who live directly adjacent to it count for more in this issue. I will say I was a regular Caltrain commuter up to the city for quite a few years when I lived in San Mateo, and having been a Caltrain commuter, I think anything that you do with grade separations that reduces the chance of tragedies occurring, I mean, which they then, throw off, obviously terrible for the people involved in them, and also create, small issues for thousands and thousands of people. If you've ever been trapped on a Caltrain for like 2 hours while they investigate an incident, it's no fun. So I spent about 5 years living in a neighborhood that had only one road in and out, the Los Prados neighborhood of San Mateo, and so I hear the discussion of, reducing it from 3 to 2. I think I do trust the engineers to examine, sort of what are the flows on the different roads, because not all the roads are equal, and one that's got a train track on it is probably going to be fewer daily trips already. In the Bel Air neighborhood, there is a plaque by our grade undercrossing on Angus for a teenager who was killed there. And I mean, here, one fatality in 10 years, that's one too many. I think taking, even if it is infrequent, you should take the safety issues seriously. My main reason for commenting was I did want to know whether the model for option B accounts for the possibility of adding 2 more tracks there. Because, if we have to rebuild it to expand the right-of-way, it seems like we ought to be planning for that in advance. So it's actually my main question.
Thank you. Next person for 2 minutes, please.
So, someone who stood up here previously mentioned that this intersection is a hazard. I mentioned in the previous meeting, and I will mention it again. This intersection is a hazard. Why are we fighting so hard to keep it? I hear the arguments from people over here supporting option A, but I can't help but feel that we're fighting over something that isn't needed. Also, the impact of noise isn't something that you just have to worry about as someone living there. If noise levels goes up, it actually affects our property values. So you have to consider it from that angle as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Is this the last person to speak from the public? Then the last.
Hi, my
last
name is
person.
Evelyn Campos, and I live in the corner of Scott Street. And I was so wondered because I was the person who will receive the most impact in that street, right? And and I want to say, I hope then you keep your promise, then not going to take none of our houses, because for me, then I bought a house in 1996, and I've been sleeping in that corner for almost 23 years. And to tell you the truth, the noise do not bother me at all. And it's like, why you are wondering about the noise? And the other thing is then, now then I live in that corner, there is less trains running during the night, in the middle of the night, even in the morning and the whole day. Because, when they run more is when the San Francisco Giants plays. That's the only, season that I can tell you the truth. I can count the trains that they pass by. And, I am happy in that corner, and I keep so many people trying to buy me that corner. And I can tell you, I clean 3 houses every day to pay my mortgage. And I don't think it's fair. Then, the Caltrain, they want to put their nose in our properties. And because most of my neighbors, they are seniors, I live by myself. I pay my mortgage by myself, and I be wondering about them. Most because they are seniors, and we are, like everyone say, we are a working people living in that street.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, folks, I know, as I've said, she's the last. 2 people get up. So I'm trying to be really understanding. We've made several announcements. So the gentleman in the suit and this lady, Rose, and then that's it, okay? So please, you've already spoke, sir. Sir, you just had 2 minutes, sir. So they're getting 2. So, sir, you've had your opportunity to speak. Please, let's be respectful of the speakers. We have the last 2 folks that are at the podium, and for 2 minutes.
Can I
Thank
actually
you.
just have 2 questions? One is that you're talking about the safety of San Bruno Avenue and San Mateo, that retrograde or whatever that you did for Caltrans, and the safety in there and the traffic. There's a lot of traffic and it doesn't look that safe and it's not lighted. So I want a question to see that how you're going to take care of that around Scott Street. And then also about the flooding. There's a lot of flooding there, and as I was driving by, there's a lot of traffic there. So I'm really concerned about when you're saying that this is going to reduce traffic, but in San Bruno Avenue and San Mateo Avenue, there's a lot of traffic. Okay?
Thank you, Russ. Final, sir?
Richard Fitting. I thought this would be a missed opportunity if we didn't recognize the civic engagement on this and how proud everyone should be in this room for the role that they played. I want to say that I'm extremely proud of my father, Phil Fitting. Thank you.
Well, and that's best served to be the last to bring that home. And I will say, Phil and I have talked a few times, and so yes, been very impressed with him too. All right, folks, that's the end of public comment. Any comments from manager from the commentary or questions that we've had, or before we bring it to council?
Sure. Again, Javon Grogan, City Manager. Mayor, you asked us to address some of the comments, and so we've been taking notes, and I will try to address most, if not all. And so the first comments that we heard around, will any homes be taken with option B? And I think we clarified that a little while ago. The conceptual design has 1 potential property being taken. It is not a residential property. It is currently a lot that is used as a parking lot. sort of around that, there was a question about would the design of option B allow for tracking, so the addition of 2 additional tracks, and that it does, and that's partly why we're anticipating that we would need to take that property. And a taking does mean compensation. It is not a taking without compensation, and there's an eminent domain process. And so that should be made clear. But again, option B would not involve the taking of any properties as shown there. The next question was, or comment was about the reduction of vehicular access around option B. And so it was stated that there's currently 3 ways to enter the neighborhood by vehicles. Taking away 1 obviously reduces that to 2. And so are there any mitigations? And the answer to that is we do not know yet, but we are in what's called the planned development phase, where we are deciding essentially what road to go down. And should the city council decide to go down the road of option B, the next phase would be a design of option B and environmental work, which will look at mitigations. And so there will be impacts, and there are oftentimes mitigations to projects. And so we would look at that, and there could potentially be opening up additional vehicular access to the community. We don't know what those are now. A number have been talked about. People have mentioned, well, can you open up an additional access, and by opening up Huntington at one of the various streets, and that is something that can be looked at. But that is essentially the next phase of this project once we decide what path we're going down. And again, there will likely be no grade separation if the council chooses option B for the next 7 to 10 years. There's a very long road to go through the approval processes, the environmental clearances, and to compete for federal and state dollars to construct this. And as Caltrain mentioned, that there are a number of other projects, both in our county and in Santa Clara County, that are competing for funds. And so in many ways, this is sort of a rush to get shovel ready so we can compete for those federal grants to install the final design. There was a question about lighting and flooding. Absolutely. No matter what is constructed, we will look at those. And during this meeting, I ran out to talk to staff because we were having flooding at our existing grade 7. We had to make sure Caltrain came out and maintain their pumps to clear that roadway. And it is back open now. But absolutely, that is an issue that we need to address ongoing at that intersection and at others. There was questions about a sound wall and potential other ways to construct a grade separation, and that will all be looked at again the next phase as we launch into design, should the city council choose that direction. And safety was mentioned. Safety is absolutely important. It's not just the experiences in the past, but it's also proactively planning for the future. And we had the presentation from Caltrain, and we know that traffic is going to increase on the corridor. And so planning for the safety of the future is something that is vested with the city council. But it's safety, it's noise, and it's traffic. And so that really concludes my remarks, and staff is here to answer any additional questions. And I do not envy the decision that the city council has. Managing change and making decisions that will impact a community is something you're vested with, and it's a very important decision, and it's not one that I know you take lightly.
I think a note I might have had is a person brought up about a street light. I know there was just lights in general in the intersection or in that saying, but is a street light a possibility? Would we find ourselves if going down option B and they go to 2 tracks, could that cause, 4, adding 2, but could that cause?
Right, I'm sorry, I talked about that. Under option B, there is enough room for 4 tracks. A street light is essentially option A, with just upgrading the stop sign to a street light. It is not a significant increase in safety. It does not prevent the additional noise, nor does it stop the gate down times from increasing significantly, as we saw in the Caltrain presentation.
Thank you. Okay, now we're going to turn it to council for questions, comments. Anyone? Nobody has any questions or comments?
first.
Laura, thank you.
So this, I guess, would be for Caltrans. There was no mention of what are the plans in San Mateo for like Terrace Villa, Villa Terrace, Santa Ynez. There's a number of other streets along the peninsula. They're exact same as Scott Street, where they either go into a residential property, but it is a railroad crossing. Is there plans in other cities that will be closing those crosswalks or train intersections?
Well, so the ones I went over earlier were the ones that we know of where there's a formal planning process. There are conversations up and down the corridor for other intersections, but those are the ones we know of where they've actually initiated a formal planning process. So I'm not sure, the ones you mentioned, I'm not exactly sure where the conversations are related to those.
Okay.
We can check for you.
And then the number that you gave, 398 trains in a 24-hour period, that's a 20-year projection?
Well, that would be when you fully reach the maximum number of trains running for the moderate growth scenario which was adopted. So obviously, growth of service would increase kind of like step by step up to 2040. I'm not exactly sure when we'd actually reach what year before 2040 would reach that, but they're going to do more analysis on that in the next phases of study on that.
And I'm sure we all in this room get stopped at a train crossing where we've got to wait for the train to go by, but I don't think it's 10 minutes. So is there an average time? Is this a minimum? Is it a couple minutes to up to 10 minutes? Is that what we're talking about?
I mean, it can vary depending on, sometimes it's just how the trains come together, which can really mess with the lights. I actually crossed Charleston intersection in Palo Alto, and then you can wait at least 10 minutes sometimes in the morning or during rush hour usually, but off peak you're not going to usually wait that long.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Sure.
So I would just say that, I've heard the presentation. I was also in attendance at the August 28th presentation. So thank you to staff for the presentation and the details tonight. Scott Street's an interesting neighborhood because there's definitely the railroad tracks a division between a residential neighborhood and an industrial part, or as you say, the autos and whatnot on the other side of the street. So I appreciate some of the feedback. Something I hadn't even thought about is, crossing those putting a stop on those railroad tracks actually prevents a lot of that traffic coming into your neighborhood and taking up the parking, which I hadn't even thought about either. But I think that everybody, and I could probably speak for everybody here, and that the goal is that in the long-term plan, 20 years out, 30 years out, there will be an increase in train traffic. So we have a decision here tonight to say, well, what do you want to do with that long-term plan? Do you want to just leave it the way it is and let us residents to drive into that area? And I drive that area. I've got a mechanic that's in that area that I head down to, and I cut right through Scott Street. Do you want to stop the residents and be inconvenienced on a regular basis? You could be stopped 30 minutes out of every hour. Or do you want to do something to increase that? I think the other thing we haven't really talked about is South City is a good question. Will South City be making plans? Has a decision been made to do a crossing overpass at Linden?
So this project is being planned in conjunction with South City. It is not being driven by South City. And what South City chooses and what we choose matters because there's only about 1,800 feet in between the two railroad crossings. So if we were going to choose to elevate our track, they would need to make an elevation change to their track. And so it is important what we decide, but it is not, the two are not interdependent on each other.
Okay. I can't voice an opinion for South City, but let's just say South City does increase their crossing. That actually increases or improves the traffic on the Scott Street neighborhood because you have no waiting now on Linden Avenue exit. And tell me if I'm wrong, isn't it less than a half a mile between Scott Street and Linden? So that to me says if I live in the neighborhood, I still have pretty good access. Good chances they're going to improve the Linden, and we close off Scott Street. I still have the ability to access the other side by just quickly getting over to the Linden a half a mile away. I think I timed it. It was a matter of 25 seconds from the Linden intersection to the Scott Street intersection. The other thing is, and I would be concerned if I lived in the neighborhood. I call 911 and I need a fire department to show up, is there going to be a good response time? And, you know, San Bruno Fire Station, I'm going to refer to 51 on El Camino, is going to head down San Bruno Avenue and make a left turn to head into your neighborhood on Huntington, or either cross San Bruno Avenue and make a left turn on the San Mateo Avenue. So I don't see the fire department really being affected by the closure of Scott Street. And I think that, for me, would be number one. That if I live in the neighborhood and, you know, someone's having a medical emergency, that we get good response time. So I think closing it off is not going to affect you. The police department's pretty close to the area, so I think you're going to get their good response time, but they can be in other areas. I definitely did not support Measure C. I just can't imagine to see the number of residents homes taken away. We're not there yet. Maybe there's a different council sitting up here in 20 years that's going to say, you know what, this is a huge impact, things have changed, and I don't know. But today I do not see that. I have a hard time, and I'll wait to hear my other colleagues and hear what they have to say. I have a hard time doing anything right now because I think it was a gentleman by the name of Drew that said, can we step back a little bit and really see what's going on with the neighborhood? There are a lot of changes happening in South San Francisco, new development happening in South San Francisco, hopefully new development at San Fran. So what does that mean for the whole neighborhood, and what are some other options? So I think I have a hard time making a decision one way or the other, but I'd like to maybe pull back and take a bigger picture. Those are my comments.
Other comments or questions from council?
Mr. Mayor?
Marty.
Clearly, no one up here wants to take any home, and that's great. Option C is off the table. But the increase in train traffic is going to happen. And with that increase, there's going to be, it'll impact the safety of everyone. And any one person passing is going to be a tragedy. So we can all agree on that. I did not hear an answer, City Manager, from Drew's question about the outer view, and maybe that was discussed at a previous meeting regarding a grade separation at Tan Fran. So are we able to kind of answer that question, that was analyzed at some point?
So the option to move off Scott Street and take a look at Tan Fran was not analyzed. We are discussing and have been studying what to do about Scott Street. Should the City Council want to entertain a modification to Scott Street and then potentially look for some additional modification elsewhere, I don't think that that's precluded. What I would say is it's really a separate project. I think you need to take a look at Scott Street, given that it is an existing crossing, given the impacts in the business plan, and decide what is the venue for Scott Street. And then should the City Council want to look at other crossings that would be grade separated elsewhere, I think that's a separate effort. I would hesitate to go down the road and say, yes, we're going to look at a separate crossing and it's at Tan Fran. I think that's a wider view. I know we've had a member of the public proffer that suggestion, but I think that's a larger effort to say, where do we want additional railroad crossings in San Bruno, and how do we attain that? I think that's a worthwhile effort. I could probably, Caltrain may be able to discuss that in addition. I know that the dollars that are out there have really been prioritized for improving existing crossings. And so to make another crossing, given the cost of these, how well you would compete with the federal and state funds, knowing that those funds have been prioritized to improve safety and deal with impacts at existing crossings. My gut would be you would be lower on the priority. But I really think they're two separate projects.
Understood. Can we have?
I generally agree with city manager's characterization of that. Yeah, I mean, you do have an option to maybe look at scope again in the next phase of development, where you go to like environmental and preliminary engineer, you could think about adding things to the project then as well. So there may be a possibility there.
Sure. So it's a great question, and I appreciate that, and that's why I'm just passing it along. It's not that I'm saying we should do that. It's just a question that wasn't answered from the public. So that's good to know that we could ask, but my gut feeling from looking at the map just recently is probably going to be fine there at Scott, because there's a lot of buildings right there at Tan Fran that would be impacted. So it's my understanding, City Manager, that there is a traffic study underway.
There was a traffic study commissioned, and it is currently in draft stage. The report is not complete, but what you did see in the presentation are images, and all of the LOS, level of service impacts, come from that traffic study. And so the council did have, and the public did have the benefit of what some of those preliminary impacts are. It is also worth noting that a traffic study at this stage of planned development is not required. We actually did it just to see if vehicular traffic was closed, what the impact would be. Would it essentially stay the same, get a little bit worse, or get better? And we know the answer to that now. Should the City Council decide to proceed down option B, which would have the roadway closed to vehicular traffic, the next phase in the CEQA process, the environmental impact process, will do a very, very detailed traffic study that will, as I mentioned before, look at potential mitigations and impacts and other spin-off projects that could help alleviate the negative level of service impacts that closing Scott Street to vehicular traffic would create. But that's really sort of the next phase of this project.
Great. And I guess what that traffic study will be able to tell us is that not all the streets in and out of the area are equal, that most people would take the other streets, and we'll be able to verify that with that traffic study. Yet, as Councilwoman Davis mentioned, the elimination of another access point is important. It affects people's lives, and looking at how we could potentially provide another entry point off of Huntington is something that could come later on during the design and the impact to mitigate the impacts of closing that one street. The last thing I was wanted to comment on is to making sure that the lighting that is currently at Scott Street apparently isn't sufficient based on some of our public's observations, and separately of what we do tonight, I'm hoping that we can go ahead and look into that and see if how poorly that intersection is lit, and if needed, we would put a light there to increase the lighting so people can be seen better as they're exiting and working in that, moving through that area. So I'll just come out and just say it. I think that option B is my preferred option based on the traffic that will be coming with the trains. And having a separation of the train traffic and pedestrians and bicyclists is very important. And I do appreciate the designs provided by, and I couldn't pronounce his name, but the effort that went into creating the sound wall, that was very interesting. So I'll leave it with that for now.
Thank you. Michael?
Through the chair, thank you. So I think it's great that the community came out in force tonight to express their opinions and stand up for their neighborhood. So congratulations to all of you for having the courage and the ambition to come out here and speak to us. We definitely take your comments to heart when you come out, and I know I can speak for all my colleagues when I say that your opinions do matter to us. But one comment that was made regarding one death being too many, I think really sums up why we're even considering this and why this conversation came about, because not just in San Bruno, but over all of the grade crossings that exist on the peninsula, and into the next county. There have been several deaths, some intentional, some accidental, but it is a concern. And Rico and I sit on the local policymaker group for Caltrain, and we've been hearing for years now about their business plan and how aggressively they want to grow Caltrain. And we hear the summary here, and you think about, okay, so 8 trains, 12 trains, doesn't sound all that intimidating, but the frequency of those trains is going to increase dramatically. And with electrification, those trains are going to be coming through faster, and they're going to be coming through a lot more frequently. In talking about, looking at the bigger picture, we're seeing the summary here, but this conversation started years ago, and I remember in a study session we had long ago, a few years back, when they were looking at all of the options. We were looking at what happens at different segments as we approach the South San Francisco grade separation, and they actually have the land so that they can do a grade separation, and so early on they were leaning toward that option, and we looked at what we can do. And one of the things that we had to consider was as trains approach, you have to consider how fast they can go up and how fast they can come down. And as we electrify them, there's even a taller footprint now because there's towers overhead that are going to power these trains. And it really limited what we could do. With the trains already coming up in South City and having to make it underneath 380 before they approach the next grade separation, there really wasn't a whole lot of options. And so that's why we have the options that we're seeing today. And this is really the culmination of a lot of work, a lot of studying, and a lot of analysis. So a lot of that work has been done. And so what we have now are the options that are really the ones that are more plausible. I don't think the do-nothing option really does justice to addressing the safety issues that they're going to be more apparent. And as the city manager said, this process is going to be a long process, and we're going to learn a lot more as we move forward. There's going to be other opportunities like these to analyze where we're going, to really see what those traffic impacts are, to really understand what the impacts to the neighborhood are going to be with that South City crossing just half a mile or so up the road. There will be some relief coming from that. And there are a lot of other traffic things that we need to look at on a global basis that might help alleviate some of those orange dots that we saw on the map. So with that, I definitely think that we should support option B and start the study. And again, that doesn't mean that it's going to happen, but it means that we are going to pursue the option. We're going to look at this as our best solution at the time, and start working toward a safer crossing there. So those are my comments.
Irene.
Thank you. My colleagues have pretty much covered it. I agree that, first of all, thank you all for coming. We wish you would come more often, and it gets kind of lonely up here sometimes. But thank you for voicing your opinions. I agree that doing nothing it may be fine now, but in 5 or 6 years or 10 years, when the trains start coming more and more and faster, you'll be back here saying, how come you didn't do anything? So we're trying to look forward and chart the safest passage with the least amount of impact to your neighborhood. We all agree that we don't want any homes taken. We all understand and all deeply appreciate how hard it is to have a home in San Bruno, anywhere in the San Francisco Bay Area, actually. But we know that. We heard you. We would say the same things ourselves if we lived there. So, but again, doing nothing I don't think is going to make you all happy, so or safer. So I would also support B.
And for myself, when I was just down there the other day and I was standing with someone, won't mention who because maybe they don't want to know that I was there when we were talking, but there were a couple of the residents on Scott and we were just talking, and I also was standing out there to watch, as I have a few times, the crossing.
So you have pedestrians that are almost not crossing on the section that they're supposed to cross. They cross on the other section, which I know it's a short distance, but it doesn't take a lot. The traffic as it flows there, if the traffic going north or south perceive that there's nobody coming from Montgomery, they roll right through it. And then I see when they get in the middle and they're turning, and I watch that for quite a while, and I've done this now 3 days at different times. And from what I was told, that's how it is. They're not, people aren't patient, people aren't cautious. I know one person was saying, I tell the kids, please, and if it takes time, it doesn't matter. But the sadness of it is what I watched, that wasn't the case. Whether they lived in the neighborhood, I don't know. They could have just been parking their cars on Herman and crossing the tracks. So I don't believe in the do-nothing approach, myself as well. I think I also heard from some of the residents of Bayshore Circle was, why can't you open it up somewhere else too? Even have an easier access that gets you to Huntington or somewhere there by San Bruno Avenue as another outlet, so we don't have to go all the way around. So I see option B as going toward the future as far as safety and the train traffic. As Michael said, what they're expecting to put on the trains doesn't seem a lot now, but they are going moderate to high, and they wanted to go high, and I think most of the community said it was a little too much, too fast, but they still have an option to go to that direction. But I also think on the safety element, with the caveat that we really look at the big picture and maybe find another access point, which some of the residents have talked to me about, so that they have another area to get out that's convenient and gets to the thoroughway, easier to get to the freeway, those type of things. So for myself, I'm looking at option B. So is there any other questions or comments from council? This is basically a provide direction to staff. So I've heard from 4 council members, option B. I've heard from 1 council member, not a variance, or correct me, to A or B at this time. So at this point, direction by council is option B. Direction to staff. And direction to staff also is to eliminate option C, period. Option C is off the table, as we already discussed earlier, but that is council's direction to staff. Does staff have or need additional information?
No, I think we're clear. We don't need a roll call motion, but we will proceed with option B, and option C is off the table.
Okay, so what we're going to also do, first of all, we're going to take a couple minutes so everybody can kind of get out in a good fashion. So, but before you leave, thank you for being here, and I want to wish everybody a happy and safe Thanksgiving. So we're going to take a 5-minute recess. Okay, we're going to reconvene the meeting, back to City Council meeting of November the 26th. We are on conduct of business. We are on item B.
Item 6B, adopt resolution authorizing the receipt of $303,545 in grant funding from the San Bruno Community Foundation in the execution of an agreement with Braun Northwest, Inc. for the purchase of a mobile command vehicle in the amount of $234,842.
Chief Barberini.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. Following an active shooter incident that occurred on the YouTube campus in April of 2018, YouTube and its employees made a donation of just over $303,000 to the San Bruno Community Foundation, dedicated to enhance the capability of San Bruno public safety first responders to respond to critical incidents. In a collaborative effort among personnel from the city's police, fire, public works, and IT departments, an evaluation of how these funds could be most effectively allocated was conducted. This evaluation included a review of after-action reports from not only the YouTube shooting incident, but also the 2010 Glenview explosion, wildland fire incidents throughout Northern California, and the shooting incident at the shops at Tanforan earlier this year. These reports identified field incident management infrastructure, including communication between an incident command post in the field and the local or regional communication centers and emergency operations centers as an area requiring attention. Staff has concluded that a mobile command vehicle is one of the most important pieces of equipment deployed by public safety at the scene of a critical incident, natural disaster, or planned large-scale event, and will best identify this identified gap, or best address this identified gap, rather. Neither the San Bruno Police or Fire Department have a mobile command vehicle, and in the aforementioned incidents have relied on neighboring jurisdictions to provide this type of asset on a temporary basis. Should we face a large-scale regional incident, this valuable asset will not be available to us. A mobile command vehicle serves a number of purposes, including emergency communications support, a secure area for those managing an incident to meet and develop strategy and plans, much-needed power while managing an incident in the field, and an extension of the city's emergency operations center. Based on the research conducted by the aforementioned group of city personnel, combined with the needs of both the fire and the police departments, as well as the needs of the city's EOC, or Emergency Operations Center, Braun Northwest Incorporated has been identified as the manufacturer that would best meet our needs in building the vehicle. You'll see samples of the pictures of command vehicles up on the screen. We were requesting approval to allocate funds for a custom-built command vehicle, so that's the closest rendition that you'll see as far as photos. You'll notice one of them says police on the side. This would not be a police vehicle, it would be a public safety vehicle, therefore not dedicated solely to the police department. This manufacturer was chosen via a competitive bidding process through a cooperative purchasing program that assists local governments in reducing costs through a nationwide government-to-government procurement service. The City of San Bruno is a registered member of this cooperative, and this process complies with the San Bruno Municipal Code. Ongoing expenses associated with this purchase include basic vehicle maintenance and maintenance of hardware installed in the vehicle. The cost of maintaining installed hardware is expected to be incorporated in the existing cost of maintaining similar items currently maintained in patrol vehicles under an existing contract. A structural and non-structural warranty is included in the purchase. The vehicle will be fully equipped, including lighting, cabinetry, workstations, wiring, and a power and battery supply, but will not include logos, insignias, computers, and communications equipment. The cost of the vehicle is $243,842, and the balance of the $303,545,000 donated will be designated for the installation of those logos, insignias, computers, communications, and other equipment. The service life of this vehicle is anticipated to exceed 10 years. Furthermore, its module composition allows for the command center to be removed from the vehicle and replaced when necessary, limiting the cost of replacing the vehicle in its entirety. Beginning with the fiscal year 2021 budget process, the cost of the replacement of the mobile command vehicle will be included in the police department's equipment reserve list, which is planned to be included in the annual allocation into the reserve along with other police department equipment and vehicles. Staff recommends that council adopt the resolution before you, authorizing the receipt of $303,545 in grant funding from the San Bruno Community Foundation and the execution of an agreement with Braun Northwest Incorporated for the purchase of this vehicle in the amount of $234,842. Before I conclude, I'd like to extend my sincere gratitude and appreciation to personnel from the police, fire, public works, IT, and finance departments for their work on this project, the San Bruno Community Foundation for its ongoing and unwavering support of public safety in San Bruno, and finally YouTube and its employees who together demonstrated a great deal of generosity in contributing to the safety of those who live, work, and visit our city. That concludes my presentation. Fire Chief Cresta and I are here to answer any questions you may have tonight.
Thank you, Chief. This has been before us, and we've had a presentation on it. Are there any questions? If there's not, this is an action item for a resolution. Is there a motion?
I move that we adopt the resolution.
Second.
Motion made and second. City Clerk?
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell?
Aye.
Mayor Medina?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Next item is under Conduct of Business C, which was going to be on consent, but go ahead and read it, please.
Adopt resolution authorizing the city manager to amend the agreement with Tanner Pacific, Inc. for construction management and inspection services for the Crestmore and Lomita Pump Stations project in an amount not to exceed $90,000 and appropriating $90,000 from the wastewater fund.
So just for the audience, this was an item that was mistakenly placed here, not under consent, so there's not a visual or presentation. But of course, staff is available to answer any questions. And Marty?
Right. My feelings on this, it was on regular conduct of business, and it wasn't until the meeting started that found out that it was going to be on consent. But I think it's important enough to go ahead and hear the status of the projects that are identified. If we can get a short presentation or discussion about what we're doing here.
Thank you. Yeah. Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. Jimmy Tan, Public Works Director. This project is related to the construction of the Crestmore and Lomita pump stations. Back in April 2018, we came to City Council to award a construction contract to JMB Construction for the amount of $5.7 million. And in addition to that construction contract, there was an agreement with Tanner Pacific for construction management inspection services for the project for approximately $500,000. Currently, the construction is under the project is under construction. The work encountered various unforeseen conditions, especially along San Antonio Avenue. There are a lot of congested utilities there. There's a 230 kV electrical duct bank. There's existing gas mains. There's water mains. There's an existing AT&T duct bank. There's sewer lines, and there's also sanitary sewer force mains. So we're planning to do what we're doing as part of the project is to replace not only the force mains along San Antonio, not only the pump stations, the Crestmore Lomita pump station, but we're also replacing the gravity sewer pipeline along San Antonio, force main along San Antonio Avenue, and then in addition to that, adding a new water line along San Antonio prior to us repaving, the roadway. So with that, there are a lot of unforeseen conditions related to utility congestion, which required us to relocate the design, relocate the pipelines, different from what was proposed during the design phase. So with that, we incurred a lot of delays through that process. So there's also delays related to the procurement of the wet well for the project for Lomita Pump Station. If you haven't been there, you can take a look at the site. It's very small wet well, so we're trying to fit a precast wet well structure within that site, but there's a lot of issues trying to make sure that it goes well. So there are a lot of delays related to those issues, and we had to rely more on the Tanner Pacific, which is the construction management inspection firm. Therefore, the construction has been delayed to February of 2020, and we are currently requesting Tanner to stay along until the final completion of the project. So this request tonight is for amendment of $90,000 to see the project through the construction phase. There is adequate money in the wastewater fund to cover the appropriation, but I think what we looked at the overall budget request, I think we will still come under. We're anticipating that because we still have contingency in our construction budget that we may not end up using all of it. So I think towards the end of the project, when we do our final project accounting, we may see that the overall project will still come under what the original request that we've made to council. So this concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Marty? Mr. Mayor, please. So these are 4 projects. It's the Crestmore Pump Station, the Lomita Pump Station, San Antonio Water, and San Antonio Sewer.
Correct.
So my concern is that we're at this point, is that $90,000 going to be enough? And how far along each of these projects are we completed? Are we pretty close? I mean, we're not going to come up with all the issues regarding the potential changes. I mean, now it's mainly the installation. The design is complete. Is it all ready to go?
Design is complete. The pipelines have been installed already. The main focus right now is to complete the pump stations.
To complete the pump stations,
correct.
Right? And all of Huntington will get repaved?
Yes.
Right. That's
eventually.
A full repaving.
It is. Sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, it will be repaved as part of the separate project because the city received grants to repave the Huntington Avenue.
Okay, and then Tanner is their job is just to see the now that all the lines are installed, is just to see the completion of the pump stations.
Correct.
Okay, and they are going to be delayed with the weather, or what percentage would you estimate that we're at?
70,
Okay,
70 or 80%?
for each of them?
Yes.
Okay. I was just curious because $500,000 is a lot. So how many Tanner staff were actually working on the project?
3.
3. And there will still be 3 working for completion?
2.
Okay.
Yeah, there'll be 2.
Okay. Got it. All right. I just wanted to make sure that was clear for me. And go ahead. I'm sorry.
But I would like to say that, $500,000 for seems a lot, but if the city had gone to council with separate projects, it would cost a lot more money. So I think the reason why we package all 4 projects together is to, basically it's an economy of scale, right? So we came to council with one package to reduce the cost for the overall construction costs to reduce the mobilization costs for the contractors and so forth. So in addition to that, the construction management inspection costs will be much lower as well. But if we do come to council for individual project, you will probably see it close to about $1 million.
All right, and just one last clarifying question. The project completion of this, for the remaining pump stations are, what is it?
Weather pending, February 2020 is what we're anticipating right now.
And then the estimated completion date for paving?
The project has to be designed. Again, it's part of the grant project, so it will come at a later time.
Do we have an estimate of the time?
I don't have that.
Because the residents there are like, I get a lot of questions about, hey, the street's getting bad, and it is bad because it's under construction.
Yeah.
So
It's just a separate project.
Okay, all right, so it's a separate project, so, all right, okay. I'm good.
Okay, if nothing else, Marty, you want to, it's a resolution, since it's on conduct. Want to introduce the resolution or motion to approve?
Sure, a motion to approve.
Is there a second? Motion and second.
I'll second that.
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell? Aye. Mayor Medina?
Aye.
Motion carries.
I know a lot of you folks are here for item E, and I know a lot have taken speaker cards, so I don't know if you do plan to speak, they need to be turned into the city clerk if they could. And we're going to go on to item D, and if you get those in, I want to see how many we have and the time element for it. Thank you.
Item 6D, adopt a resolution approving the remaining budget amendments for fiscal year 2019-20.
So, members of the City Council, Javon Grogan, City Manager, and our Finance Director, Keith DeMartini, is here with a brief presentation. But what the City Council and the public will remember is that this was a part of a larger package that was before you at the last meeting. There were 2 items that Council wanted held over for a little bit more time to review and potentially discussion tonight. And so Finance Director DeMartini will go through those now. Thank you.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor, members of the City Council. My name is Keith DeMartini, your Finance Director. Tonight I'll be providing a brief overview of the 2 budget amendments that were presented previously in last City Council meeting. And the objective of the presentation this evening is to adopt a resolution approving of the remaining budget amendments for fiscal year 1920 that were presented during the Q1 financial update presentation last City Council meeting. This table on this slide lists the 2 budget requests that were requested of City Council. I'll go through them briefly here. The first one, item A, is related to the fiscal sustainability project assessments and the strategy implementation assistance. As Council is aware, staff initiated this project earlier in 2018 with the goal of assessing a variety of city fiscal challenges, identifying strategies, and implementing a wide range of actions to resolve structural budget deficits in the general fund and in other city funds. Activities that have already been completed, which I discussed earlier, include an assessment of the general fund, implementation of a development impact fee program, and a number of other fiscal projects. There are a number of projects that are currently underway, such as a number of tax audits, including property sales, hotel room and business license taxes, and a review of the city's user fees. The requested appropriation request for $150,000 is an allocation for the next phase of this critical project, which includes a number of operational assessments and strategies that may include the items listed here on this slide: a citywide fleet study, a citywide facilities assessment, a downtown parking meter program analysis, and a stormwater funding assessment. The second item on this table, item B, is in regards to a license plate reader for the police department, which would support parking enforcement efforts by digitally chalking vehicles, reducing the need for a community service officer to get out of the enforcement vehicle and physically chalk a violating vehicle. And vehicles would be chalked virtually and would reduce the physical strain on officers and increase officer safety. It would also reduce cheating by violators and improve enforcement efficiency. After the first year, the recurring annual maintenance cost would be included in the police department's operating budget in fiscal year 2020, 2021, and going forward. So that concludes my presentation. Be happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you very much.
Okay, questions? Michael?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So first of all, I want to apologize to staff for my lack of preparation at the last meeting and causing you to have to go back and do additional work, and I do appreciate that effort. And I also want to thank my colleagues for allowing me to take the time to be able to mull some of this over. So, my concerns were chiefly around the impacts to the budget, and I wanted to make sure that I fully understood what the one-time and recurring costs were going to be. And with my conversations with the city manager and with the other information that was provided, I am far more comfortable now with moving forward with these. I also had the opportunity to ask some privacy-related questions about the LPR data, which were also adequately responded to in my previous email. So I don't have any additional concerns with these, and I am in favor of moving forward with them at this point.
Any other questions from council on item D? It is a resolution for action. Is there a motion?
I will move that we approve the resolution.
Second.
Motion made and second. City Clerk?
Councilmember Davis?
Aye.
Councilmember Medina?
Aye.
Councilmember Salazar?
Aye.
Vice Mayor O'Connell?
Aye.
Mayor Medina?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Item E, please.
Item E, consideration of an urgency ordinance providing interim rent stabilization and/or just cause eviction protections to tenants in advance of California State Assembly Bill 1482.
Sure. Hold on, please. Irene, Vice Mayor.
Because I am a landlord in San Bruno, and this would have an impact, either however it goes, on or could have a potential impact on my income, I'm going to recuse myself from this, and I'm also going to leave. So this is my last council meeting, and I will miss you all, and I see you're all engaged in this. I hope you find other things to be engaged in and continue to come to council meetings, at least on occasion. Our agendas are on our city website, so don't be focused only on one thing. Look at the whole city. So thank you, staff. I will miss you all, but I'm sure I'll see you once in a while. Oh, I'm sorry, and council too.
Okay, now we will come to the city manager, please.
Yes, so to the mayor, council, members of the public, we are here tonight to talk about the consideration of an urgency ordinance providing interim rent stabilization and/or just cause eviction protections to tenants in advance of California Assembly Bill 1482. And so this is on our agenda because at the very last council meeting on November 12th, we had a member of the public that had received an eviction notice, and a few additional members of the public speak up in support of that individual. And the city council requested that staff look into the matter and bring back information. And so we have done that, and so I will now turn it over to Community and Economic Development Director Darcy Smith to give a presentation about options for the city council to consider.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council. My name is Darcy Smith, the city's Community and Economic Development Director, and I have been tasked with the city attorney of drafting this urgency ordinance that I'll present tonight. I'll make my presentation quick. And first I'll start with the objective for tonight's meeting, cover some quick background of why we are here tonight, summarize this new state law, which is commonly referred to as Assembly Bill or AB 1482, but its official name is the Tenant Protection Act of 2019. I'll cover the urgency ordinance in a little more detail and present the possible action for you tonight. And we'll also have time at the end for any questions. The objective for this item tonight is for you to consider an urgency ordinance that has two separate provisions. It's an and/or option. One part is rent stabilization, and the second part is just cause eviction protections. As the city manager mentioned, at your last city council meeting, you had a member of the community step forward, and that speaker expressed concern that others may receive eviction notices. And we have also heard from organizations that support these tenants supporting that concern. So because of that background, we prepared the ordinance. The state law, which will go into effect, has two parts, as I mentioned. The first part is an annual rent cap. That goes into effect January 1st. And what it will do is impose the rent cap on these certain units. It is 5% plus the consumer price index. The consumer price index has been quite high recently. In April, which was the benchmark for this year's rent increase, it was 4%. So that means the maximum rental increase would be 9%. The just cause eviction protections are a little more complicated. It's not as simple as math. They apply to tenants who have been there at least 12 months, requires certain landlords to have the valid no-fault reason. So what's a no-fault reason? They're specified in the law, but essentially the most common ones would be if an owner or family member needs to move into the unit, or if the owner intends to demolish or do substantial remodeling of that unit. And there's more examples, but these are, again, the two kind of common ones that might resonate. If the valid reason is no fault, there is a requirement for relocation assistance of 1 month's rent or other specific financial support. So at fault just cause, what's that? It's sort of more significant things like non-payment of rents, criminal activity on the property, very significant property nuisance, and there's other things in the law, but those are kind of the more common ones. There's also a long list in state law of units that are excluded. The main thing is new construction, so that's rolling, and those are projects that have been issued a certificate of occupancy right now in the previous 15 years. Deed restricted affordable housing units or other covenant recorded properties. Single-family homes or condos that have no corporate ownership, owner-occupied homes with no more than 2 tenants, including accessory dwelling units, duplexes, but only if the owner lives in another unit, and other provisions. And again, it doesn't apply to tenants who have been residing in the units for less than 12 months. This urgency ordinance, so essentially what would it do? It would basically enact state law. Again, there's two provisions. In order to enact an urgency ordinance, I think the last one you had was maybe last year around marijuana, but there has to be a current and imminent threat to the public peace, health, safety, or welfare. So as we stated, why are we here tonight? The community has come forward. It's been substantiated through organizations in the community. It's important to note it requires a 4/5 vote, and since we have one abstention, that means all 4 of you would have to vote in favor tonight, and if approved, it goes into effect immediately. Unlike typical ordinances require first reading, an introduction, and then adoption, the state law governing these urgency ordinance means it takes effect right now because there's, again, this current threat, and it typically expires in 45 days unless it's renewed, but because we would have state law going into effect January 1st, this would be, as drafted, set to expire on December 31st. Also important to emphasize that under state law, these specific provisions are enforcement by private cause of action brought by the tenant. And there are organizations in the community that would support those tenants that exist already, such as the Legal Aid Society, who have already, to my knowledge, been supporting those tenants. So the proposed urgency ordinance would, again, do 2 things. One component would extend those interim protection to tenants. And who would that ordinance cover? It would cover tenants who have been in their unit for 12 months as of December 31st, who have received eviction notices that have not expired as of the effective date of the urgency ordinance, and whose landlords do not otherwise qualify for an exemption under the state law, as I mentioned. So there's 2 main parts, pretty simple. Section 3, as drafted in the draft ordinance, implements the just cause eviction requirement, identical to the requirement established in state law. So it refers to state law. Section 4 would implement rent stabilization provisions in San Bruno from the date of adoption, which could be tonight, to December 31st. It would be equivalent to those rent caps that are established in state law, which I mentioned are 9% currently. That's the more complex component of the urgency ordinance. And some things for council to consider, which were mentioned in the staff report, are that there may be no significant benefit. AB 1482, when it was drafted, sort of, considered this sort of rent gouging that might occur after the state law was signed into effect, was in October. So it specifies that there's a rent rollback to March 2019 values. So tenants, though, who might have received a notice of rent increase may be unable to afford it. It's possible, if they were served with it, could challenge their finances, and they could be affected if they would face eviction before the end of the year. Those are the 2 components. Your options tonight, you have 4 options. You could adopt the urgency ordinance with both components that would implement the just cause for evictions from residential tenancies and the rental rate limits as defined in state law. Could adopt the urgency ordinance limited to just the just cause for evictions. As I mentioned, the rental rate component is a little more complex and governed by other parameters. You could simply decline to adopt the ordinance, or the motion to approve it could fail without 4 votes, or you could provide additional direction to staff regarding the provision of the ordinance. However, then we'd get back to you at the next meeting, which is in December. That's shrinking the window for this to be in effect as we get closer to January 1st. So that concludes my staff report. Myself and Mark Zaffarano, City Attorney, who worked on this, are happy to answer any questions you have.
Anything from the City Manager before I open it to the public?
No, I just want to thank Darcy Smith and her team, with especially Pamela Wu, our housing and planning manager, that really worked extremely hard over this on this over the last 2 weeks, as well as the city attorney, who did a lot of research, talked to a lot of organizations and people at the state. And so we're here awaiting your discussion and able to answer any questions.
Okay, I'd like to go ahead and go to the speakers in case you need to get home. I'm understanding there are 16 speaker cards for this topic this evening. I'm going to ask for it to be kept to 2 minutes or less. If you don't use all 2 minutes, that's okay, but 2 minutes or less. We're going to call a couple names up. If you would go ahead and start to make your way to the podium so we could keep the flow going. I'd ask the audience no applause or comments pro or con, so everybody has that same respect and opportunity during their time to speak. So speakers, please, cards.
Aros Harmon, followed by Evelyn Benitez.
Good evening. As I think all of you know, I live in the Bel Air neighborhood where my spouse and I bought. We were renters I was a renter around the Bay Area for 20 years before I bought, and just speaking as a landlord now, I think the actions of landlords to attempt to force people to move out before these protections come into force are vile, and I am not generally a fan of price controls. I'm a bit of a neoliberal shill in terms of thinking that we need to have market incentives to produce more housing. But I find AB 1482 completely reasonable in terms of allowing adequate increases over time. And so I hope the council will be adopting the ordinance.
Evelyn Benitez, followed by Alex Melendrez.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and City Council members. My name is Evelyn Benitez, and I work for the Legal Aid Society of San Mateo County. I'm here to state our agency's support for the adoption of the urgency ordinance providing immediate rent stabilization and just cause eviction protections to the tenants of San Bruno before the Tenant Protection Act takes effect January 1st. One reason that I like to stress is that the just cause eviction protections in AB 1482 would not only provide specific reasons for at-fault evictions, but it would also provide relocation assistance to tenants with no-fault eviction. That is, it would provide a payment equal to 1 month's worth of rent to help facilitate their move. I believe that it is unfair that landowners could take advantage of this window, the eviction window, that is between the date that AB 1482 was signed until it takes effect January 1st, to just evict their tenants without no fault of their own. The financial burden that tenants face in moving, especially for low-income tenants, is unbearable. Tenants undergo many financial hardships. Tenants are expected to pay rent for to the current landowner until the notice expires. They also have to pay a security deposit, often first month's rent, sometimes last month's rent, all to secure their move. Let us not forget that the lost wages that tenants lose in taking time off of work to search for a new place to live and to get all of these payments in. Not everyone has the opportunity or the luxury to have paid sick leave or vacation. Thank you.
Thank you. Alex, and then we
Alex
can call the next
Melendrez,
couple.
followed by Plymouth Ansbergs.
Good evening, Mayor Medina, City Council, and City staff. Thank you for bringing this so quickly to the dais. I know it was no easy task for anybody. My name is Alex, and I'm representing the Nonprofit Housing Leadership Council, myself as a San Bruno resident, and as someone whose family has directly received one of these eviction notices in San Bruno. My uncle and you're about to hear this, but my uncle and their entire building received them on the 29th and were told to vacate, October 29th, and were told to vacate by December 31st. That's a difference of 24 hours before they would be covered by AB 1482. It's happening significantly in San Bruno and up and down the county, so much so that Menlo Park, South San Francisco, Redwood City, Daly City, San Carlos, San Mateo, and the County Board of Supervisors all passed emergency ordinances, all requiring the same supermajorities to protect their communities from these obvious natured evictions. Mass evictions and rent increases are a bad public health problem that could be solved with good public policy. This emergency ordinance is that, a temporary measure, to protect the immediate public health and cover a loophole in the state law that is already going to be on the books by the end of the year. However, the reassuring impact in the lives of the San Bruno families who already received these notices means providing them protections that they would otherwise be provided to them, as I said earlier, with the difference of either a few weeks or, in my family's case, a few hours. You have the opportunity tonight to be active guardians of our community, and time is limited. Please pass an emergency ordinance tonight with temporary rent stabilization and just cause mirroring AB 1482 to let the very residents who brought this issue before you know that their families, renters, and my family are welcome to stay in San Bruno for the holidays. The true measure of any society, city, and jurisdiction can be found in how it treats its most vulnerable citizens. Thank you very much for your bravery and consideration.
Plymouth Onsbergs, followed by Tina Wong.
Hi, my spouse already spoke, so I think you know what our situation is. I wouldn't be directly affected by this rent eviction thing that's going on, but I was a renter fairly recently, and so I have a lot of empathy for people who are in that situation. I think this ordinance seems like a really good idea. I'm in support of it. My one concern is I was reading some articles from a couple of the other cities who passed similar things, and it sounds like maybe it wouldn't apply to people who've already received the eviction notices before it passes. So I guess it seems like it might be somewhat symbolic, and that also sort of a question, like, will this cover people who've already received notices? Thank you.
Thank you.
Tina Wong, followed by Wayne Ho.
Hi, my name is Tina Wong. I'm with the Chinese Real Estate Association of America and also BetterHousingPolicy.org. I'm also a real estate broker in San Bruno since year 2000. I do manage properties. The end of last year, I have a 85-year-old couple came into my office and told me I want to sell my 6-unit apartment in San Bruno, East Side San Bruno. I said, why? Because I have 2 tenants peddling drugs and not paying me rent for 1 year. And I can't afford to hold on to my property anymore. So I said, no, let me try to handle it for you so you could continue to have income. And so I probably evicted 2 tenants who, because also there's been reports from the neighbors from the same buildings that their lives being endangered by these people. Are evictions be bad? No. Okay, it's helpful because there are 2 units of the tenants selling drugs, and there's strangers going into the apartment, and all the lives feel threatened. So please look into what's the urgency of adopting this ordinance. How many evictions are there? Have you done any calculations? So please, I'm urging you that not to adopt this. And my client actually spent $150,000 after those 2 people moved out, that what they have damaged. And they have raised rent, 10% from a 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and from $1,250 to $1,400. So that's more than 10%, but is it really a lot for a 3-bedroom, 2-bath after they remodeled the whole building? I don't think so. So don't look at just one side. There's also another side of story. So I urge you, every one of you, please, there's property ownership rights. Please consider that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Wayne Ho, followed by Carolina Perales.
Thank you. Hi, thank you, City Council. Good evening. I speak on behalf of, I'm a real estate agent, also manage properties, but more importantly, I'm a resident of San Bruno. And I feel like this emergency ordinance would be very dangerous for our city if adopted. For the reason that, if you're making something that is legal at the time that was done, illegal right now, then it could open, potentially maybe lawsuit. I don't know, maybe the city attorney can answer that. So from my experience, the landlord, they evict tenants due to multiple issues. But probably the most important one is the quality of the tenancy. So of course, that is being covered by the just cause part of the AB 1482. But however, because originally I'm from San Francisco, so I knew how the rent control and the just cause eviction affects not just landlords but also tenants. These so-called costs would be very hard to prove, and the tenants will always have legal aids, but the landlords will have to pay for them. Since this is already in effect, I would say the bigger picture is that rent control doesn't help to ease the housing crisis that we have. The minute that you have rent control, the landlord's going to raise rent. Like we talked about that lady earlier in the meeting. She lived in the property, Ms. Fitting's house, for 30 years. I don't think Ms. Fitting raised too much rent, but imagine that if he has to, if there's a cap on it, he will raise rent, right? Because besides tenant has expenses, landlord have more. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Carolina Perales, followed by Maria Esparza.
Good evening. My name is Carolina Parrales, and I'm representing Faith in Action Bay Area. I coordinate the community response line of San Mateo County, and we respond questions and sometimes do referral from people that have different questions about their situation on immigration or any concerns they have where their rights have been violated. Recently, we have been receiving a lot of calls about the rent increases, and when they heard a law was signed, they wanted to see if they were protected under this law because many families were receiving eviction notices. I just want to put out the latest case that, and she gave me permission to talk about her without mentioning the name, but she has been living here for more than 3 years. This family pays already $34,000 for a 2-bedroom apartment in Shelter Creek area. She has a 10-year-old girl with disabilities that attends Portola School in San Bruno, and she has a baby. The husband works 2 jobs in order to pay rent, and they receive a no cost eviction notice, and they had to leave before the end of the year. So my questions for you here is like, families in this city are waiting for you to be the firefighters to extinguish the fires that are happening right now with many families that are doing everything they can to keep living in the community they love. So please act immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Maria Esparza, followed by someone with the last name of Munoz.
Go ahead, please.
Buenas noches, mi nombre es María Esparza.
My name is Maria Esparza.
Estoy aquí porque hace algunos días recibí una carta de desalojo. Cuando abrí la puerta de mi apartamento, estaba la carta pegada en la puerta por afuera, y es una carta de desalojo sin causa justa.
I'm here because a few weeks ago, my family received an eviction notice that was just posted at the door of our home. And it's a letter that said that we have to leave our place that we have been living for many years, and it doesn't have any cause why we have to leave.
También estoy aquí esta noche para apoyar mis hermanos y amigos y familiares de San Bruno.
And I'm here to support other families like my own family that are in the same situation that mine.
Es importante que esta noche ustedes como concilio tomen acción y hagan una causa justa. Es algo frustrante. Cuando viene la carta, nosotros tenemos que hablar, mis hermanos y yo, tenemos que hablar con la familia, vienen los hijos, tenemos que hablar de qué es esta carta.
So I'm here tonight just to ask you to please act immediately because it's really frustrated that I'm assuming that my friends that are here present today, like mine, the adults can take these notices and try to do something, although it's difficult. But for the kids that are in the middle of a year school, it's more difficult to receive this notice that they are probably not going to see their friends anymore.
Cuando nosotros hablamos con nuestros hijos, tenemos que decirles, nos están desalojando. Ellos dicen, mami, daddy, ¿a dónde vamos a ir? Y nosotros decimos, I don't know, no sabemos.
So it's really difficult to ask, to answer questions from our kids that they said when we said that we have to move soon, and they are asking us where we're going to live, and we respond, we don't know what we're going to do.
Porque ahora estamos para celebrar Thanksgiving, las fiestas de Acción de Gracias, Navidad, Año Nuevo. Entonces, cuando nosotros tenemos miedo salir a comprar la comida, cuando regresemos, ¿qué tal que hayan cambiado la chapa? O también cuando tocan la puerta, nos asustamos, pensamos, ¿será el sheriff que viene a echarnos para afuera?
So especially now that Thanksgiving is approaching, we are in fear. We don't even want to celebrate. We don't know if we go shopping and somebody's going to lock our things
down, and the sheriff is going to come and take our things away. We don't know. We are living in a state of stress.
Este año tenemos, cada fin de año tenemos que dar gracias porque Dios ha tenido misericordia de nosotros para darnos los alimentos. Espero que todos los dueños y propietarios que tengan este lugar, cuando vayan a celebrar en sus mesas, ellos no piensen del daño que han hecho a las familias, niños y ancianos.
Okay, thank you, because it still needs to be translated, but it needs to keep in the time limit. Go ahead, please, out of respect.
So, am I allowed to
I'm asking you to
translate?
please continue out of respect to the speaker. Yes, please finish your comments.
So what she said is that she's asking, now that we're going to celebrate Thanksgiving, she's asking all the homeowners to keep in mind all the families that are going to probably end up on the streets or living in their cars because they don't have other way to go.
Thank you.
Ms. Munoz, followed by Wendy Cruz.
Buenas noches, señores, respetables señores del concilio y señor alcalde.
Good evening, respectful members of the council and mayor.
Mi nombre es Ligia Muñoz. Estoy presente hoy ante ustedes para informarles la situación tan angustiante por la que estoy pasando con mi familia, ya que he recibido una orden de desalojo sin justa causa en un momento en que se supone que debo estar muy feliz. Estoy muy angustiada y estresada.
My name is Ligia Muñoz, and I'm here to let you know that I'm in the same situation that other families. My family also received an eviction notice, and I'm in a state of stress that we don't know what we're going to do.
Esta situación afecta a toda nuestra comunidad. Estamos viviendo una angustia muy, muy alta y una preocupación ante estas órdenes de desalojo.
This situation is affecting our community. We are in a situation that we don't know what to do, how to act, because it seems that we don't have many options.
Ser comunidad significa respetarnos los unos a los otros, respetar a los ancianos, respetar a los niños y respetarnos como lo que somos, seres humanos.
Be community means to respect one another, respect seniors, respect children, respect families. And that's what, for me, community is.
Hoy, 26 de noviembre, a unos días de quedarme sin un lugar en donde vivir, me pregunto, ¿a dónde me voy a ir si me echan de mi casa?
Today, November 26, probably days before I have to leave the place that I have been considering my home, I'm asking myself where I'm going to go.
Por eso hoy vengo ante ustedes a solicitarles muy humildemente.
That's why I come today to ask you, humbly ask you,
que aprueben la ordenanza de emergencia y nos permitan celebrar con tranquilidad las fiestas como todos los merecemos.
To please approve this emergency ordinance, and that way we're going to be able to celebrate with our families these holidays that are coming.
Porque al igual que los propietarios de los lugares donde vivimos, nosotros también merecemos agradecerle al Dios que nos protege de tener una familia feliz, un hogar y un lugar en donde estar tranquilos con nuestros hijos.
Because our families, like the families of people, of landlords, we also have the right to celebrate and give thanks to our God that has given us many things during the year.
¿Se imaginan ustedes una noche como la de hoy, tan lluviosa?
Okay, thank you.
¿Qué
Last
pasaría?
translation, please.
Thank you.
Go ahead with the translation, please.
Okay. She just asked you to please imagine if your family has to live out in a night like tonight, that it's raining and it's very cold outside.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Wendy Cruz, followed by Patricia Melendrez.
Tengan todos muy buenas noches.
Good evening, everyone.
Mi nombre es Wendy Cruz.
My name is Wendy Cruz.
Soy madre de 3 hijos.
I'm a mother of 3 children.
Y tenemos también una orden de desalojo.
And we have an eviction notice.
También queríamos esta noche con la fe en ustedes que pueden poner una orden de emergencia. Solo pedimos eso.
We are putting tonight our faith in you, members of the council, that to vote and approve this emergency ordinance.
Solo pedimos eso porque queremos estar este fin de año seguros y queremos estar protegidos en un techo.
That is the only thing that we are asking you tonight, because we would like to have an end of the year in a place that we are secure under a roof that is going to protect us.
Y queremos esta noche darles las gracias por escucharnos.
And we want to thank you tonight for being able to listen to us.
Y también en esta ciudad nos sentimos seguros y nuestros hijos tenemos las escuelas también seguras, que es lo que más nosotros estamos afectados.
We feel secure in this community, and our children feel secure in their schools too. So they are going to be affected too if an ordinance doesn't pass.
Y la fe de nuestra familia es estar protegidos en esta ciudad.
And our family has faith that we are going to continue being protected in this city.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Patricia Melendrez, followed by Jordan Grimes.
Hello, my name is Patricia Melendrez. I would like to thank you all for allowing me to speak tonight. On October 29, I, along with all of my fellow neighbors in the building where I reside for the past 10 years, received a 60-day notice of eviction. Of course, it came to all of us as a horrible shock, even more so during the holiday season. I have always paid my rent as expected. I have never received any complaints about me. I consider myself a good tenant. I have heard and seen on the news about this happening everywhere, but you never think it will happen to you, and then it does, and it comes as a shock to you. You are helpless, the stress, the sleepless nights of not knowing what's going to happen. I have lived in San Bruno for 30 years. My children grew up here. They attend school here. And my 6-year-old is asking me what's going to happen, and I literally do not have an answer for her. So I am here today to ask you for help. Help us all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Jordan Grimes, followed by Susan Getchell Wallace.
Good evening, Council. That's loud. Honorable Mayor, thank you for your time this evening. My name is Jordan Grimes. I'm here both as a lifelong resident of San Mateo County, as well as a lead member of Peninsula for Everyone. We're a regional grassroots group of neighbors who advocate for what has become known as the 3 Ps of housing policy: production, preservation, and most importantly tonight, protection. So as we all know by now, in the wake of AB 1482's signing by Governor Newsom early last month, unscrupulous landlords throughout the state have begun regretfully retaliating against tenants by issuing evictions and hiking rents ahead of the bill taking effect in January. These actions are in direct violation of the spirit of the law, if not the letter of it. I think it's important to note at this point in the evening that we aren't talking about the behavior of most landlords here. We're talking about bad apples who are evicting people and jacking up rents to capitalize on vulnerable tenants during a period of time in our collective history when stable, affordable housing has never been more scarce. I do just want to make a couple quick points regarding some of the things heard tonight. This ordinance will not halt housing production. In fact, multiple developers testified in favor, people who actually build housing testified in favor of the bill in Sacramento. The California Apartment Association was neutral on the bill, so that's an important point. But finally, I just want to say that those of you on the dais have the power to put a check on this kind of behavior. Housing advocates along the peninsula often hear our elected officials extol the virtues, of local control. I hope you will use the power of local control for good tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Susan Getchell Wallace, followed by Elaine Gilbreck.
Good evening, honorable members of council. I'm Susan Getchell Wallace and currently serving as a director on the SAMCAR Board of Directors. I'm here this evening to advise members of council that the SAMCAR Board of Directors recently met and approved a resolution to establish a task force and approved a resolution to establish a task force to help San Mateo County tenants with some of the short-term unintended consequences of AB 1482. First, our task force is to be a source for displaced tenants to seek assistance in finding a new place to live. We are experts in quickly finding replacement housing and have a history of helping in doing so. Second, until the new law goes into effect January 1st, 2020, SAMCAR has established a fund to assist tenants that have received a rent increase since the governor signed the new bill into law that is in excess of the March 15th, 2019 rollback rent base plus 9% as allowed. We understand under AB 1482 that landlords are not required to reimburse tenants for this rent gap. Tenants that feel they have received a rent increase in excess of what the law will allow are welcome to apply to SAMCAR for a grant to be reimbursed for this difference. In closing, we're asking you to remove the rent control component in Section 4 and the retroactive component of Section 4, in Section 3, 4, anyway, and the retroactive, I'm losing my pace here, and the retroactive component of Section 4 in the proposed emergency ordinance. We ask that you do not create more unintended consequences because of an isolated situations. It can be addressed and resolved together. Please note that 100% of the funds allocated for this grant program are from our local association of realtors and affiliate members who are also residents, neighbors helping neighbors.
Thank you. And from the audience, please, allow me to be able to ask the speaker to wind up. Thank you.
Elaine Gilbrecht, followed by Rafael Cons.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. My name's Elaine Gilbrecht. I'm the Executive Officer of San Mateo County Association of Realtors, also known as SAMCAR. We're a not-for-profit, and our members are realtors and property owners. So I'm here to speak tonight to ask you not to pass this urgency ordinance. We are doing many educational programs for our property owners, and they're following the law to a T now and intend to follow it when AB 1482 goes into effect in January. So we don't feel that there is a need for an urgency ordinance now. Most of our property owners are what's known as mom and pops and are not the ones hurting people. And the evictions that have been put into place were done so legally at the time. So if you do choose to pass the ordinance, we ask that you remove any part that's retroactive, because you can't punish someone who was following the law at the time. You can't make something illegal that they did that was legal at the time that would make them not in compliance. And I also want to point out that most of the mom and pops are your below market rate property providers in this county, and we've researched to know that that's true. So thank you for your time tonight, and we hope that you don't pass this urgency ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Rafael Cons, followed by former Mayor Larry Franzella.
Good evening. My name is Rafael Cons, and I'm a property owner and a great landlord. I am against rent control. I'm not here to tell you the problems of rent control. We all know that there are many. And we all know there are good and bad property owners. So instead of demonizing all of us, why don't you have a committee that deals with these bad ones? Demonizing all property owners like myself for the problems that a very few are causing is wrong. Not everything is a black or white issue. There is a gray area. Use that gray area. Please do not make the legal action of a small mom and pop property owner in San Bruno that was performed a month ago illegal tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you.
Larry Franzella, followed by Maureen Mitchell.
Thank you. Larry Franzella, you're here tonight with 35 days remaining in the calendar year. To increase rent up to 10% takes a 30-day notice. The new law goes into effect 4 days later, which would roll it back. So at worst, a tenant is going to have to pay 4 days of that potential extra 1%. it's pennies. To increase it more than 10% takes a 60-day notice, and the new law is in effect. Then you're looking at penalizing property owners who were within their rights and acted within the law and gave notice, and in my opinion, bringing some potential liability to the city to possibly defend that action. Wrapping it up, this is just an ordinance that you don't need to bother with 35 days remaining in the year. It's time to use a little common sense and let your staff do some things that can really help people. Thank you.
Next speaker, please.
Maureen Mitchell, followed by Daniel Lee.
Good evening, Council and fellow San Bruno. I've lived in San Bruno for 20 years, and I've been a renter for more than half of my life. And it really breaks my heart to hear about people being evicted, especially at this time of year. Currently, I have a small condo, and I can tell you the rent is very low. And I keep it that way because I like the tenants and I want them to stay. And also, that condo is my retirement. And so I do want to keep it up, and I want to keep it in good condition. So, with this ordinance, what I have issues with is that it's retroactive. And laws, for me, laws are to the future, that you know what you're getting into versus being retroactive. So I realize that there's two sides to this issue, and it's a very, very difficult issue. So.
Thank you.
Daniel Lee, followed by Gina Zari.
Hi, my name is Daniel Lee. I would like to stress that I am an immigrant, minority, Asian, mom and pop small property owner, and doing business with the city of San Bruno on San Mateo Avenue. And we have a very good relationship with the city of San Bruno. We were discriminated from where I was born, the country. We escaped the dictatorship where I was told what to do. We hated it. We hated it. I have no problem with the CPI plus 5% increase in the rent. However, we are looking forward that it's going to be reduced in the future. I do have a problem with the just cause eviction. In Parado, I was trying to evict a tenant who is selling drugs in the premises parking lot. We were not able to evict the tenant. I mean, the Legal Aid Society came in, and then it was a mess. It would cost us another $20,000 to just initiate the eviction process, and then my wife and I figured it out. Look, if it's going to cost me $20,000, he can stay there, let the neighbors suffer it, and then the tenant can stay there, so we don't evict them. It's very difficult. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Gina Zari, followed by Ravi Lynn Antonio.
Mayor Medina, council members, good evening. I find myself in a triage position where I'm submitting my slip late to try to respond to some items that are incorrect. First of all, only 3 jurisdictions have actually passed retroactive ordinances dealing with evictions. And it's recently been determined that those are illegal ordinances. 8 have turned them down. That's the first item. The second item is I have spoken with the property manager of the building in San Bruno, had a very long conversation along with my CEO today on the phone. None of the situations, none of the units that are covered by this individual, this property owner, this owner, would be affected by any retroactive or prospective ordinance you could pass. They cited retrofit. extensive retrofit. And as a matter of fact, in that building, they haven't done remodeling of the kitchens or bathrooms for 30 years. I understand the timing is bad. It's before the holidays. I understand the timing is bad. It's immediately after the passage of 1482, yet it doesn't take away the fact that those units need to be remodeled. Wouldn't be covered by this ordinance. I just want to stress how important it is that you understand that going back, creating an ordinance that would retroactively change behavior that's already taken place is extremely onerous. It decimates property rights. In San Bruno, you've got some tremendous property owners, very few of, if any, bad actors. Even the instances that you heard of tonight were not bad actors. I haven't heard of a single instance of a bad actor. It's an unfortunate situation, bad timing perhaps, but 30 years to have not remodeled a bathroom and a kitchen that's not unreasonable. That's a reasonable suggestion that they're making. And I guess that's it. Thank you.
Next,
Ravi
please.
Lynn Antonio.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. My name is Ravi Lynn Antonio with the California Apartment Association. We are a nonprofit trade association that represents rental property owners. I wanted to focus my comments tonight on the practical value of having Section 4 in your ordinance, and this is the one to implement local rent control in the city of San Bruno. I want to repeat that if the intent of the council is to prevent exorbitant rent increases happening from now until December 31st, I believe that San Bruno already has those mechanisms in place to take care of that. One would be the state of emergency that was signed by the governor as of October 27th, but also extended on November 22nd. It activated under California Penal Code an anti-gouging law that says rental housing the rents cannot be raised no more than 10% during the state of emergency. So that covers our period right now until January 1st. But there's also the embedded rollback in AB 1482 as staff presented that rents will immediately go back to March 2019 levels as of January 1. So it already has that mechanism that even if there was a rent increase that was given March 16th, that even if it was at 80%, that rent will go back to whatever it was March 15 as of January 1. And as former Mayor Larry Franzella mentioned, the 60-day notice also applies. Also wanted to mention that in the ordinance, another reason why you cannot move forward with Section 4 is that the last sentence of that provision actually violates Costa-Hawkins state law because it puts price controls on single-family homes, condos, as well as post-1995 properties, and that is illegal under state law. That's not 1482 can put price controls on single-family homes, but not local jurisdictions. That's what Costa-Hawkins limits you in doing. Didn't finish. Thank you.
Thank you. Any more speaker cards? Is there anybody we missed? Okay. Anything staff wants to say before we bring it back to council? Attorney? City Attorney?
Just a couple of comments. The members of the public made a few comments. One of the questions was about legal risk. Might we get sued? And the answer is, well, we don't know. Lots of people can sue the city. It's hard for us to speculate who might or might not sue under what circumstances, so we can't really say much about that. What we can say is that the provisions of the ordinance that are referred to as retroactive, as currently drafted, if your eviction notice hadn't expired by the effective date of the ordinance, which is tomorrow, then the ordinance would protect you. If the city council decides that that provision should not be included, then in essence there's no reason to adopt the ordinance because it takes 60 days notice to evict people, and the 60 days would not expire until after January 1st. So the way the ordinance is drafted, there is I don't know that I would call it retroactive. The provisions of the ordinance reach back to notices of eviction that have not yet expired as of the date of the ordinance. And that protects people whose eviction date would be between now and the end of the year.
All right, thank you. So let's bring it to council for questions. I'm sure there, Michael.
Through the chair, thank you. So what I'm wondering is,
I have some concerns with the action, but I mean, who could not be moved by what we've heard here tonight? And I'm wondering if we were to do this tonight, if we were to put this in place, all it really does, it doesn't give the city any authority to do anything, but it would give the renters the ability to challenge this in court. So if we were to give them that ability to go do that, realistically, would it keep them in their homes through the end of the year, or could an eviction that's in place still be enforceable by the owners in spite of their ability to challenge it?
So I'll take that. It's a good question. You know, normally the city does not get involved in the private relations between landlords and tenants, and the city of San Bruno has generally not been involved in those relationships economically over at least the last decade. However, one of the things to point out is that it's almost impossible for city staff to answer the sort of what about this situation, what about that situation, who is it going to help, who is it going to hurt, without knowing the specifics of each, because as we've heard tonight, there may be circumstances with the tenants and circumstances with landlords that the city is not privy to and really doesn't have any obvious way of finding out. So what we can say about the ordinance is that it would allow tenants to stay in their properties until the end of the year if they've received an eviction notice that is effective before the end of the year. And whether those tenants would go to court, or whether they would have gone to court anyway, or whether they would stay and hold over after the holidays, or do a whole variety of things, is really something that city staff isn't able to comment on. But we can tell you what the ordinance would do and what its effect is.
Okay, and that was really the gist of it, is would it allow people to stay in spite of the fact that the eviction had already been?
No, this particular ordinance, if the eviction notice has expired before today, then this ordinance does not protect those tenants. It's only if the eviction notice were to expire between tomorrow and the end of the year would this ordinance apply.
Right, and that's what I was afraid of. I'll let my colleague.
Marty or Laura? Marty?
I think this goes to the city attorney, so kind of going on with Michael, I wanted to have a better understanding of a theoretical eviction. So someone here that got a notice in the last week, their legal recourse is what?
So if someone got a notice for eviction in the last week, and if that was a 60-day notice, they would be protected by state law because the notice does not expire until after the 1st of January. So this ordinance would not do anything one way or another for that individual. The main people that it potentially protects are those people who have received an eviction notice before today, and which notice would expire between tomorrow and the end of the year.
Okay, and if the renter wanted to fight it, they would be able to pursue that through court, and they would have additional time to do that? How does that work?
So that question is probably best directed to the organizations that represent tenants in court on a regular basis. The city does not do that.
Okay. Is there anybody available? So what happens?
Hold on real quick, please.
Sorry, go ahead.
You have to go to the
Could
microphone.
you go to the podium, please? And once Mr. Medina asks you the question, if you can identify the group, or so we understand the affiliation when you're responding.
So just disclaimer, I'm not a lawyer, but I work with Legal Aid Society of San Mateo County. I'm a project coordinator, so I often take intakes, so I am familiar with the eviction process if you have any questions.
Right, so somebody who is getting evicted and they go ahead and come to you and say, well, we have nowhere to go, and they wanted to fight it. And the idea there, I guess the gist of my question is making sure that those that are being evicted, that have received those eviction notices, that they're not just going to be on the street?
So there is a process that is followed after the notice expires. So usually, so basically this ordinance would provide a legal argument for tenants to have in court. So after the notice expires, the next step would be the landowner to go to the court and file what is called an unlawful detainer to try to gain possession over the property. And then after that, they would have 5 days to respond, 5 court dates. We usually help them provide the answer, the fee waivers, to get that in on time. After that, there would be, the landowner would go back to court and try to set up a date for settlement conference, which is an opportunity to see if they can come to an agreement before going to trial. So that whole process between the notice expiring to them actually having the sheriff come and take them out of their apartment or the unit that they're living in is usually 4 to 6 weeks. But again, this ordinance would give them a legal argument if they go to court or some way to negotiate in settlement conference. Do you have any other questions or any hypothetical situation that you would like to put out there for me to kind of clarify how it would work out?
Well, I think I'm good with you.
Yeah.
I was going to ask
Okay.
specifics about the ordinance and
Okay.
for the just cause.
Okay.
Or, I'm sorry, I get confused, but you can go back a couple slides, please. Okay, so there's the examples of no fault, right? So if somebody is getting evicted and it's at no fault, what the AB 1482 allows is 1 month of rent for relocation purposes. So by the council vote approving this ordinance, that would provide a month's protection or months of rent for just cause evictions.
That's correct.
Right.
And if the council were to adopt the ordinance, essentially all of the provisions that the city council directs us of AB 1482 would apply between now and the end of the calendar year.
Okay.
Real quick, Marty, did you want to hear on those topics that you had from anybody else from the realtor side, if there's a different, or did you want to get more data?
If they want to.
Is there anybody
comment on
that
that,
just
but-
want to be, and also if you could do the same and identify which organization you're with, please.
Thank you for the opportunity to provide a response. Rovillian Antonio again with the California Apartment Association. So, Councilmember Medina, the question was, from my understanding, what is the recourse right now if anybody were to receive a 60-day notice before 1482 were to take effect? I wanted to provide some relief to the council and to the community members that because of the statewide state of emergency signed by Governor Newsom, it also covers evictions. That is new. That one was added in after the Santa Rosa fires last year. So under California Penal Code 396, it also states that residential properties, that people in residential units cannot be evicted during the state of emergency that's proclaimed by the governor or the president. So in addition to that, it also removes the financial incentive to evict somebody for the sole purpose of raising the rent up to market rent. That's also, it makes it a misdemeanor actually, under the California Penal Code 396. So again, the initial state of emergency was signed October 27th. So I heard some dates about eviction notices being given out October 29th, 2 weeks ago. That is covered under the state of emergency, and then it was extended again on November 22nd.
Thank you.
Councilmember Medina, if I may, I'm compelled to make a comment about that. So the information that we have in the language of the Attorney General's provision on his FAQ page says that the provision against eviction applies to a situation in which the landlord is looking to or has re-rented the property at a rate that the landlord would have been prohibited from charging. So the prohibition on evictions is really only related to price gouging and is not related to all the other myriad fault or no fault reasons that people might or might not be evicted for. And so in those situations, once the tenant has already been evicted, it may be difficult for the tenant to establish that the landlord has or has not increased the rent, and whether that increase has or has not been more than what was allowed under state law. Does that make sense?
It's a little confusing. For me,
So-
I don't know about anybody else up here, but I think it comes down to this, right? We have people here in this room that are taking time out on one side or the other, but those people here who are renting, what are they going to do? And they're coming here and they're asking for a filler of the gap that the law didn't provide. The law, my understanding of it, did a poor job of creating this situation. And once again, cities are dealing with the mess that the state generated. And I'd like to fill that gap. Now, I guess here's the question, and whomever can answer it. You can't stop an eviction. You're going to go to court, and it seems to me like the biggest thing that someone will get out of this is a month of rent for relocation purposes.
Well, they may or may not get that. They may also get protections from evictions that are not based on just cause, or if there is an alleged just cause by the landlord would have the opportunity to prove that up in court. So ultimately, a judge is going to decide whether the eviction proceeds or not.
Okay, but if it wasn't for a just cause, if some of the stories that I heard today were that I've been paying my rent, everything's fine, and now I got this eviction notice, and in 60 days, I need to leave. And the question that was asked about, well, what happens is then you can go to court, but at some point you're likely going to be evicted, and the recourse by us passing this would be one that you would get a month of relocation expenses, and then it's in the court's hand to decide. But it's a little bit more of a protection. It's not a guarantee that you're going to get evicted.
I think you're correct, Councilmember Medina. This law does not guarantee that any tenant or any landlord is going to prevail in their court action. There's no guarantee of that right now. So if a tenant's eviction notice, for example, were to expire between now and the end of the year, and they do not move out, then the landlord, as was explained, can go to court, file an unlawful detainer case, and that person may or may not be evicted next year. What this urgency ordinance would do, and the effect of it is, it would keep tenants in their units until the first of the year so that the state law can become effective, and then the parties are going to be bound by the provisions of that new state law.
Okay, thank you.
I don't have any questions.
Okay. Michael, do you want anything back before I talk? Or?
Yeah, so, I mean, there's a lot of layers to this onion, and it does seem like the state took some precautions in creating some protections and left some gaps. And so we're hearing generalities, and so if we pass an ordinance, it is very much a generality that applies across the board. So we may be trying to use a hammer to fix a very small issue, and we may be completely missing the problem. And part of what I heard tonight is that if the people that are here that are at risk of losing their homes, they've been evicted because of what's listed up there, intent to demolish or substantially remodel the unit. None of this matters. None of this applies. And I am far more interested in helping our current residents to find a resolution to this problem. And even if it's just a deferral, even if we can somehow keep them in their homes through the holidays and we deal with this later. And I know we have no authority to do that directly, but we do have some representatives here that I know, and I've talked to council members in other cities that have created advocacy boards that help deal with this. And rather than pass some legislation that has zero effect just so that I can go home and sleep tonight, it's not going to cut it for me. And I would really like to see some mechanism that can help us as elected people work with whatever groups are willing to work with us to defer this. And it could be that there's a lot of deferred maintenance on the property in question, but choosing to start that project at the beginning of the rainy season and during the holidays, it seems like a pretty crappy thing to do to people personally. And so I would like to hear somebody propose something that actually addresses that problem, the concerns that we've heard here tonight. And it doesn't sound to me like anything in this resolution would actually address that.
You mean the ordinance?
The ordinance.
Okay. Hold on, please.
So
I'm going to, since most of the council who wanted to speak at this point, I'm going to say this is something that, came up, and we certainly brought it forward. We put it on to staff in a very short window, not to be able to go get statistical data and other detailed information, which puts it hard on staff. So it's saying, hold this, do this. So I appreciate staff doing that. For me personally, Councilmember Salazar, you said some of it. On the rent stabilization, with the current structure that's in place with the state of the emergency and the extension that has occurred, and with it being rolled back to 2019 of March, I don't know that the rent stabilization that's placed in the ordinance is really what we're hearing tonight, nor is it a factor in my mind at this point because of the safeguards that are now in place, unfortunately, due to the state of emergency with all the fires that we've had. The other thing is that, like you just said, I have spent some time on this. I have spoken to colleagues in Daly City, South City, Millbrae, Burlingame, San Mateo, and the county of San Mateo, just to get a perspective. And yes, I watched another city's city council meeting regarding this topic because I wanted to see firsthand and understand it. Now, as I watched that, what I did watch was some speakers that came up and said, we can assist. We can offer resources. Yes, there's the county, but I also know in all reality, private entities sometimes can move the ball faster, give immediate assistance in 24 hours, not in 3 weeks. So I am in the same boat of, the retroactivity concerns me because to pass an ordinance, or an emergency ordinance that says what you did legally is now illegal is a concern to me. I think there is some risk, potentially. But I think more importantly, it's like, how do we help folks? I know I spoke to city staff, and thank you to the city manager, thank you, Darcy and Mark, who put together a sheet just of information. Because my point is, too, not everybody may know the resources that are available. I really would like to see, I know there's a task force, but watching the other city to the south, where it was brought up that there are monies to help in the gap of the rent until it rolls back to March, that there are opportunities, so let us help relocate if that's the need, that's the necessity. And so I would like to see those folks come together, because everybody has what they believe is right, but really what's right is taking care of those people that are displaced. So that's what I would like to see, and with us having X number of days left in this, the year, and then 1482 takes effect, that's where I would concur that I'd rather see a prospective, a proactive, and a resolution to help those that need it, and we have people here that I think are willing to do that. Is there any other? Laura.
I didn't have any questions earlier, but I guess I should make my comments. So I'm in total agreement. You cannot pass a law and then go back on that. I think that San Bruno is filled with amazing landlords that are not here, the majority of landlords are being fair. I mean, I know a number of them, and they do the right thing. And so we have a law that that's going to be passed. They're doing the right thing. You know, a lot of older properties, so maybe they do want to remodel. I mean, we heard that for 30 years, the bathrooms haven't been remodeled or faucets haven't been remodeled. That it's a fair thing that they want to evict, they want to remodel, and then bring somebody else in. I think shame on those landlords if you're out there and that during this window of opportunity that you are evicting tenants during this period of time for the means of profits. Shame, shame, shame on you. But I don't think that's the problem here. I think that for those residents who fall into they've received an eviction notice, I think we need to direct them to agencies. Thank you for being here tonight, if anybody's spoken out, to agencies that can support them, that can help them, that can find and get into a better place with a landlord that is fair and reasonable, and you can stay there for 30 years. This urgency notice is for a small minority, and I don't think we should pass an urgency ordinance for the majority.
And I'm just, and it was hit on, but again, I get frustrated that Sacramento passes something and yet leaves it to all the jurisdictions throughout the state to try to figure a way and brings this here. And that's what's unfortunate. They must remember, because some of them were council members or supervisors, what they do up there in Sacramento affects all of us down here. And what they should have done is have it take effect immediately. A lot of time has gone by, but again, that's how it was signed. So that is the unfortunate part. And, you know, as a former renter, I was blessed. And she lives in town. She was great. They were both great. He's passed on, she's still here. And so I understand that. My mother's been a renter here in San Bruno. So I do get when you have it good and you don't. And my mother always has said and still says, you know, what comes around goes around. Karma's horrible. It may not come today, but it will come. So those that take advantage of anyone during any time, not just the holidays, karma exists, because my mother can't be wrong. So with that, I understand that staff, city attorney, city manager, it requires a 4/5 vote. It requires all four of us. So I'm getting the impression there may not be 4 votes. Do we still need to have the resolution, or just see if somebody wants to introduce it?
It does certainly appear that way to me. However, if somebody would like to make a motion, they're welcome to do so.
Does anybody want to?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Marty.
I'd like to introduce the ordinance.
Is there a second to the resolution? Hearing, I'm going to ask again, is there a second to the resolution? Hearing none, then it dies for lack of second, and it did need all 4 of us in the affirmative. So with that, then.
The motion would fail because there was a
Okay.
lack of a second.
And through the chair,
Yes, please, Michael.
a couple of things. So I want to thank staff for the work that they put into this. And even though we didn't support what was presented, I know there wasn't a recommendation one way or the other, but I do think this conversation here was important. And I saw a reaction from the representative from the Apartment Owners Association, and I was wondering if we could hear from her on, and from Samcar, if there are some other options that we have as.
And for those folks that are leaving, and you have this situation, I understand that. If you have this situation, maybe they can give you some aid and assistance.
Right. Please,
So or at least exchange a phone number, maybe, or just exchange a phone number or something.
And I didn't get, can you hear me? Good. I didn't get to say this, I didn't have enough time, but we do have a task force. As Susan said, I have been successful in finding places in Burlingame, Millbrae, all along the peninsula, helping find tenants that have been displaced, find places to live. As long as they pay their rent and they have no criminal record, it is a very easy thing to do. And I would say, to compliment this city in particular, San Bruno, you have very affordable rents. Your median rent is about $1,500. That's incredibly affordable. You should be proud of that, and we can find these tenants a place to live. If they contact you, you can contact me at Samcar. You can contact our CEO, Elaine, right there. Susan, who made the announcement, please tell me, and I will help find them a place to live.
Is that what you want, Ryan? How are you?
Thank you
Oh,
again.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Rovi Antonio again from California Apartment Association. Wanted to also provide some clarifications when there was a resident who was talking about receiving an eviction notice in Shelter Creek. You know, if they were to contact us, we could clarify that. Yes, it's unfortunate that they received a 60-day notice, but Shelter Creek wouldn't help them in this ordinance anyways because Shelter Creek is a condo, so they would be exempt. But I could provide the technical information as well. Wanted to also send kudos to the city staff for creating a dedicated website homepage on AB 1482. I did have the opportunity to review it this afternoon prior to coming to this meeting, and all the information is correct. However, what's missing there is some resources for property owners to be able to to educate themselves on the new laws so they don't inadvertently violate laws that would hurt tenants. So we would ask to be added to that list of resources as well, because we also provide technical information for property owners on what AB 1482 will be in January 1, what forms and disclosure statements that is required under the law to ensure that all renters will know their rights, roles, and responsibility come January 1. But most importantly, our Housing Industry Foundation also provides housing assistance programs when there's when there's an emergency, and we move in the speed of business. We can dispense housing assistance program up to $2,500 within 24 hours to the landlord. If there is a housing issue, it can go towards paying for security deposits, missing rent, or even utilities. And another opportunity also is, and I tried to provide this information to the renters who were leaving but didn't want to take my flyer, but I'm more than happy to share it with the city. But there's also the renovation program that people could apply to see if funds could be used to help rehab some of the properties that would qualify. And we also have a affordable housing initiative that would also help provide rental assistance, replacement housing for below market rate units. Thank you.
And I'd like to ask of staff through the clerk's office if they call, or for whatever department, if there are folks that have called in the 2 units or 2 situations that I'm aware of, only 2 that I'm aware of, if they be given these resources and an outreach. I don't mean just email, I mean a phone call, I mean a contact number. I believe Gina Rovi would be willing and to assist, and that's the most important thing to me, is that we are going the extra mile, we are doing something, and we are giving them the resources and the revenues, if necessary, if they're available.
And through the chair,
Michael.
One additional request, and this is toward the city attorney, is could we potentially reach out to the landlord and ask them to reconsider their decision on their timing? And I know we have no authority to force them to do anything, but would it be completely out of line for us to make that request?
I would say that you could certainly request, and I think you have requested from the dais tonight to the landlords. I think enmeshing city staff in private disputes between landlords and tenants about whether they should or shouldn't be evicted is something that is not within staff's particular level of expertise.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay. There's nothing else on this topic. We're going to go ahead and move on to item number 7, comments from council members. Michael?
Well, I mean, no, I'll go ahead and make my comments, and it's very disappointing. There are decisions that we make up here that, regardless of whether or not I believe I did the right thing, still don't make me feel very good. And it breaks my heart that people are going to have to be dealing with this during the holidays. We've heard a lot about some resources that are available, and I certainly hope that we continue to make those available to the public. I don't know what else we can do to outreach to the impacted families, but it's not a happy situation, and so I just wanted to share that.
Thank you, Michael. Laura? Marty?
It's another, if you're not affected by this situation, in your home, or if you're watching TV, this Thanksgiving should be extra special, maybe. I don't know. It's sad that we have to deal with this situation, and so everybody have a great Thanksgiving, and keep in mind of those that don't have what you have.
I always echo, but I hope that we would come together in a community and a nation and think of that year-round, and not just around a particular week or a season that is advertised in the marketplace so much. I want to obviously thank staff for their work. I want to wish everyone a happy and safe Thanksgiving, keeping in mind the roads will be wet, so please be cautious out there, and let's try to be kind to others, and if you can, help those that do need that help. So with that, we are going to go ahead and adjourn this meeting to the next regular City Council meeting held on December the 10th at 7 o'clock right here at the San Bruno Senior Center. Meeting adjourned.